Well, good morning once again. We'll call the meeting of the Sacramento County Board of Supervisors back into session after a brief recess. And again, just once again, offer our congratulations to Susan and Sue. And with that, we have a full complement of members of the Board of Supervisors and are then prepared to go back into our agenda. I think we have one other item we have to handle as relates to the election of the chair and vice chair for 2017 year. So, Flo, you want to read that into the record and help us walk through that process?
Absolutely. Item 32 is the election of the 2017 chair and vice chair of the Board of Supervisors.
Okay. With that, we have a rotation, and I'm acting as vice chair currently, and I think I'll just open it up for nominations, and we can go from there.
I'd like to nominate Supervisor Tolley for chair.
Second.
Okay. Any other nominations? If not, then please vote.
Unanimous vote.
Thank you.
I'd like to nominate Supervisor Peters for vice chair.
Second.
Thank you.
Unanimous vote.
Okay.
The controversy of the Board of Supervisors.
Yeah,
We don't get along at all.
I wasn't kidding, Sue. Always like that.
See, your first two votes were 5-0, see? At any rate, well, thank you to my colleagues for confidence they've shown, and certainly and electing me as chair, and I do my best to help us get through the meetings and provide the effort needed to help this board throughout the remainder of the year. And certainly congratulations to Susan, and don't get nervous. I run a couple minutes late because I've been known to do that. So, but if you need to start the meeting, Susan, just go right ahead.
This is going to be difficult with Sue there and Susan here.
Oh, okay. I was talking to Vice Chair Peters. I was just saying, in the event that I run a little bit late, don't get too nervous. But if I get 5 minutes late or something, go ahead and gavel them in and start.
I'm glad you've given me that dispensation.
Not that you wouldn't have done it anyway, but okay. With that, then again, congratulations to Susan as well. And now that we've gotten that order of business taken care of, we want to go back to the consent calendar, I believe. And I know we have some speakers on at least one item, and we'll turn to. Any items need to be continued, Flo?
We do have some items,
okay, so
and
why
I'll
don't
go
you
through
walk
that.
through those, please.
Okay. First, I do want to point out, Chair Natoli, that you have 2 off-agenda matters. I do need a motion to determine the necessity to hear both matters.
So moved.
I've been moved and seconded. Nothing further, then please vote.
Unanimous vote. The first off-agenda item is a communication received and filed related to Supervisor Phil Cerna, 1st District's travel to Israel December 2nd through the 9th of 2016.
Okay.
We do not need to take action on that. Your second off-agenda item, I do need a motion to approve the resolution celebrating the 20th anniversary of the City of Citrus Heights.
Very good.
Do you want to make that motion?
Yes, I'll make that motion.
Okay.
Microphone.
Second.
Yes.
Okay. Moved
So
moved and seconded. Please vote.
Unanimous vote.
Okay. Very
For
good.
your consent matters, items 1 through 30, I do need a motion to continue to January 24th. It's item number 19, approve resolution to execute an amendment to an agreement with Environmental Science Associates for the preparation of an environmental impact report and supporting technical studies for the Natomas North Precinct Plan Project.
I'll go ahead and make the motion to continue that, Mr. Chair. And again, just remind our executive staff that I would appreciate a briefing and to schedule that briefing on it as soon as possible.
Okay. Very good. All right. Moved and seconded. Please vote.
Unanimous vote. I do have one other note that I want to point out. For item number 20, you are introducing an ordinance repealing and reenacting county building codes contained in Code Chapter 16.02, 16.04, 16.10, 1624, 1628, 1632, 1634, 1636, 1637, and 1638, and adding 1639. You're waiving full reading of this ordinance and continue to January 24th for adoption.
Okay, and thank you for noting that. I know we do have a speaker, and we'll pull that off the consent calendar in just a moment. But anything else then?
That concludes my notes for your consent
Okay,
matters.
very good. Then we're going to pull item 20 off the consent calendar. We do have a speaker, and there's been arrangements made in advance to allow the speaker 5 minutes on that item. Also, I would turn to my colleagues. Are there any other items we want to continue or speak to?
No.
Not right now.
No, I had a number of questions in my briefing with our county exec, and a number of questions on various consent matters. They've all been answered to my satisfaction.
Okay. I would just note that then, with that being said, that item 25, we received some correspondence. This is the appointment of the to fill vacancies on the Slough House Resource Conservation District Board of Directors. And Robin, we received that correspondence yesterday. I shared that with you. I think it was also shared with other members of the board via the clerk's distribution. Did you have a chance to look at that? Because there were some issues raised. Again, the practice, as it's been, and I'll let you speak to it, but is that that body, I guess, for any number of years, sounds like approaching 40, has come through the Board of Supervisors to fill its vacancies and for its appointments versus utilizing an election process that if it didn't play out, then they would seek an appointment. And one of the candidates that was expressed an interest who was not recommended on the slate that was forwarded by the district board in their decision raised some issues. And so I didn't know if you wanted to address that, if it's something you would ask us to put over for a week or two to look at, but I'll turn to you if we could. And maybe you could read that item, Flo, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Item 25.
I did read the item and
Oh.
did you want to?
Yeah, just read it into the record if you would, please.
Yeah. Item 25 is the resolution appointing directors to the Board of Directors of Slough House Resource Conservation District.
Thank you.
In the process of having the Board of Directors refer it to the Board of Supervisors for appointment, that comes with a 60-day deadline. So if the Board of Supervisors does not take action, then it goes back to the Board of Directors for their appointment process. In the Board of Supervisors determining whether this person is appropriate, the legislature encourages a review that they are not biased and can appropriately fulfill the duties of their position. So if your board feels that you could take more time in that consideration short of the 60-day deadline, you certainly could move it from today to the next available board meeting.
There was a couple, I appreciate that. I guess my reading of this, there was another issue that was raised, though, and it related to, I guess, it questioned the district's long-standing, I guess, utilization of a process that basically vetted it through our board for the appointment versus the election, actually calling for an election and then seeing if qualified candidates, run in an election, but the cost of those elections. And there was some quotations here relative to the legislature, I guess, pretty good at, telling us how we ought to conduct ourselves, whatever the cost. But it talked about trying to, look at the cost of the election. There was some reference to that. Could you elaborate on that? That, somehow we would facilitate elections in these smaller districts via some cost reduction or consideration? Is that?
And that's the way the legislature designed the appointment process for these special district boards, that they recognize the fact that they're small, they're underfunded, and that putting to the expense of a full-blown election might be an excessive burden on their budget. So all of these are choices given to these special districts.
Okay, but the choice, let me just be clear then on this. So the choice is not this board's, I guess if we were going to offer free elections or somebody's going to pay for them, but beyond that, this district board has the ability to utilize a process, recognizing what the legislature may have said as part of that enabling legislation or statute, that basically it's their choice to decide if they want to call for an election versus seek appointment and confirmations of those appointments through the Board of Supervisors. Is that correct?
Right. They have to take an affirmative action, passing a resolution by their board, making that decision, and making the referral for appointment process to the Board of Supervisors.
Okay. Let me just ask you one other thing then, because the memo that preceded, and again, it's the review that your office conducts regularly when we have these requests, and they come in from reclamation districts and in water districts at times and other special districts. You don't do any vetting of the candidates as far as their qualifications or lack thereof. Basically, you look at make sure that the process was adhered to, and in making your recommendation to this board, you're not reviewing candidates for those seats. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Well, let me ask you one other question. So is there anything you would suggest, recognizing that we have this before us, again, they've acted appropriately, we have, a party who was, one of the candidates who was considered was not part of the recommended slate of members to be appointed. Is there anything else you would offer as far as way of advice that we could either relay to the Resource Conservation District and or this board? Obviously, I guess we could bet the candidates. We haven't done that regularly. I know there's been a couple occasions with fire district appointments and so forth. We've done that, but is there anything else you would recommend for us to, in light of what's been raised as issues, that we would want to maybe communicate with the district?
I would point out, and it might be worth a conversation, but in that same section of the Public Resources Code is their conflict of interest requirement that board members conduct no sales to or from the district of their own personal assets or the district's assets or the district's services. So the board's decision to pass a resolution and forward this name comes with their set of responsibilities to properly do that within their fiduciary duties and governance processes. If your board would like time to make sure that that has happened, again, postponing it for one more meeting would not in any way interfere with that process.
Okay, you raised an interesting point. So last question I have for you then. So are you suggesting, or at least pointing out the issue that they are under law required, just as other members of any elected and or appointed body that has requirements in the law to file conflict of interest forms, are those required before they enter office or upon entering office? So
upon entering the office.
So, but that's fairly routine. So any district, and they have to have a conflict of interest code that's filed with the County of Sacramento, if I'm not mistaken, and with Secretary of State. But that's not necessarily what was alleged. There was no allegations to that sense. I didn't pick that up. Again, I don't want to cast aspersions because that wasn't what was in the letter. It was basically they felt that there should have been, consideration given to candidates as it relates to maybe different representation from geographical areas and or more diversity of representation, as I read part of the letter anyway. Okay, but from a legal standpoint, then there's nothing else that we should be aware of on this.
I think we've covered it.
Good. All right, thanks. All right, that's all I had on item 25. We'll leave it on the consent calendar then. All right, with that, then we can maybe call up item 20.
Okay.
And then we'll come back to the consent calendar. So.
All right. Item 20, you are introducing an ordinance repealing and reenacting county building codes contained in code chapters 16 and various sections. You are also adding 16.39, and you are waiving full reading of the ordinance and continuing to January 24th.
Okay. Mr. Gill, I think it might be helpful to have just a very brief introduction. I mean, we had the reading to the record, and so maybe if Mr. Penrose or Mr. Logson could just give us a brief overview of what's before us. It's a fairly lengthy written staff report. We do have other written information submitted to this board, and we will have testimony on the record in advance of any action we consider today. So it might be helpful to have just a little bit of background
Absolutely.
on this.
Mr. Penrose is ready to start the presentation.
Okay, good. Thanks.
Good morning, members of the board. This item is somewhat of a routine item that we bring before the board every 3 years as new codes are adopted at the state level. There's a process by which the local jurisdiction then can adopt those codes to be implemented in their jurisdiction. And through the adoption process here at the board, we are then allowed to make local modifications to those codes. So what's before you today is our recommended adoption of the Title 24 code sections that had been called out in the actual board item. It does include with it modifications to our ordinances that then make minor modifications or modifications, whether you determine them as minor or not, to those code sections to be applicable in Sacramento County. If this item had not been brought in front of the board, the codes that were adopted at the state level would automatically have been implemented as of January 2017 with no modifications to thereof. So what you see in front of you today is the introduction of the ordinances as modified to account for local conditions and interest related to those codes with the intent for them to be adopted on January 24th. I will highlight that or would highlight at least that in this year's adoption, essentially the modifications that have been made to prior year codes have been brought forward. They were struck in terms of the title and the year and reintroduced. But in almost all cases, they're identical or very, very similar to the code modifications that we'd made in our last cycle. There were modifications made to some of the violation language, which really just implements policy that this county has been using for violation as it relates under the codes. And so there was additional information provided there, as well as changes made to the ag exempt structures and properties, as I understand it. And fundamentally, those are the two areas that have additional information that have been provided, and the ag res or the ag exempt actually made some modifications to the criteria for that. So there are a number of changes, though, that are made and that are all identified in the ordinance as presented to your board today. So I hope that.
Okay, all right. Let me ask colleagues if you have questions on this. I have a couple, but are there any questions? Okay, before we take the speaker, a couple of things, Mike, and thank you for your report. One, just for the record, I know there's been some contact, at least with some members of the board. As a part of the adoption in times past, the fire code has been a part of that, and apparently there's been some work amongst the fire agencies to come together, and so there's no fire code changes. It may be in law, as you said, and would be, are the rules that we would have to abide by and regulate. But could you just give a status on that, where we are with any fire code? It's not included in today's action, so.
Yeah, thank you for asking for that. There are a number of fire districts applicable in Sacramento County that if any of those fire districts have an interest in modifying their code for local requirements or features, then it is required that it be brought in front of this board with those recommendations for modification to the fire code. It's not required that it comes with this item, and at one point we were close to having that to come with it, because we've done it in prior years where the whole package has been brought, both the fire code as well as the other codes that are affected today. And there was some disagreement between different fire districts within the county as to what modifications may need to be made, so we couldn't find, at least at this point, for bringing it forward at this hearing, we didn't find a consensus, a uniform consensus. So that's why it was not brought forward at this point. They still can be brought forward by each fire district, and we would facilitate that at such point where any modifications to the fire code that would need to be reviewed and approved by this board can be brought forward, but we're not yet sure what the timing of that is. And there is a deadline. Is it 6 months that it has to happen? It will need to be brought before the board if there's going to be modifications to the code within a 6-month period. So there still is some time. That date starts January 2017. But if there's no modifications made to the fire codes during that time, then it would be static, right? Yes. It'd be as adopted at the state level. Does that help clarify that?
Okay. And then who bears the cost of bringing that forward? Fire districts, or do we do it as a part of our process? We absorb that?
We would absorb that as a part of bringing the board package forward.
Yes.
They've done all the work in terms of the.
Well,
yes.
right. Yeah. All right. Let me just turn to a couple discrete items. One, I want to thank you for your work on the definitions as it relates to agricultural buildings and agricultural exemptions when applicable and reasonable. I did want to point out, though, on page 12, we focused in on kind of the cutoff between the ag res and the ag parcels. We talk about on page 12 under subsection 14 about ag 20, or a parcel of land consisting of 20 or more acres, which is consistent with the discussions we've had, but I do think it needs to be ag 20, 40, 80, or 160, any of those ag zones that those permit, because it just says ag 20 here, so again, so it's not in question. I'm not saying the building department wouldn't apply it that way, but I do think.
Above an ag 20 and above.
Okay, all right, 20, if that's what you want to say, but that's not what it says here. So we need because this language got addressed previously, and something got left out, and again, it's with no intent. But so I want to be sure that that's clear. So
understood, and we did not write it that way. So 20 and above would be what's intended.
Okay. All right. I did want to ask, and I asked you earlier, and I don't know if Robert or somebody would be available to respond, or Robin, but this relates to buildings and definitions on page 23 of the information that you're bringing forward. And I know this has been an issue, and a couple of specific situations, and that's the manufactured and prefabricated structures, where people bought in small horse barns or stalls, stanchions, and then they don't get a permit. They get it per manufacturer specs, and then we go out there and tell them you got to have a permit. It's already in place. It may be some years have passed, but this definition of the size, this 12 by 12 by 9, is that something that we locally have the discretion over, or is that something that's defined in state code? Because I can give you 2 specific examples where this has been problematic, and sometimes the solution is you got to tear down half the barn, or tear the sides off the barn, or you got to cut the barn in half, and or go through a permitting process. A lot of times the manufacturer may not be anywhere to be found anymore. That doesn't mean it was built badly. And so I guess I'm curious about this, because the size issue has been one that has caused us some problems, and maybe you're familiar with the circumstances, but nonetheless, Robert, now's the time to ask about this, and that's why I'm asking about it.
Okay, hi, I'm Robert Logston. I'm the Chief Building Official for Sac County. The building code allows for a structure up to 120 square feet, 9 foot in height, to be built on residential property without benefit of a permit, exempt. We did several years ago allow for these. We've had numerous parcels without the county in ag properties where they put up these structures to shelter horses and stuff. The size didn't seem to be sufficient to allow for a horse in and out, and 12 by 12 was determined that would be an acceptable allowance for size, to still go with the exempt permit, to be exempt from a permit. The height.
Who determined that, the 12 by 12?
That was part
enough
of an agreement with, I think it was John Hallomer was the BO at the time.
Okay.
Robin was part of the discussion with it. That said, and then discussion with the public also, that said, okay, 12 by 12.
Well, discussion with the public, I don't know which public we had the discussion with, but again, I don't want to debate that, but I guess I would ask between now and when this comes back 2 weeks from now, if you could take a look at that again, does that comport with what other jurisdictions are doing? We want to be right for our jurisdiction, but I know it's been problematic.
Yes.
Again, I can cite 2 specific cases where, we had a lot of friction over this, and if there had been some allowance in the building department to look at this, but how we got to 12 by 12, I understand a 9-foot height. That's pretty consistent with what we've done elsewhere on ancillary structures and so
Correct.
forth. But these are typically have been in rural and or state type lots, and I guess I would ask us to take a look at it. If this has local jurisdiction and local discretion, then I'd ask us to take a look at this if you wouldn't mind doing
Are
it.
you looking at size as a limit, or are you looking at?
Yeah, the size. The 12 by 12 is, again, if you have a couple of horses, and you got some hay and tack and everything else, that can be pretty confining. And I don't know they'd sell them in 12 by 12 by 9s. Some people maybe had double that size, and that's where we've told people, guess what, you can rip off half your barn or take the roof off of it, and then it's not a structure any longer. Well, that's not practical, and there's always a route to go for a permit. And
Right.
so I guess I'd ask us to take a look at that. If
We will
could.
do that, Supervisor.
Okay.
We can do that.
All right. Good. All right. That's comments I had. And again, thank you for your work on it, and thanks for responding to that. All right. With that, then we have one speaker on this, and he has submitted some written information, and I think it's been distributed to board members as well by the clerk, and I know County Council and Community Development's received it all. So I'd call Chris Lull. Chris, I'm going to give you 5 minutes on the clock, Chris.
Thank you, Don. This proposed amendment takes the language that's in 109.4 in the state building code and turns it into a unlimited sanction. It does not provide for due process, and it also withholds the permits from people before they pay the sanction that nobody has an ability to appeal. It specifically says in the county amendment that it's a administrative penalty or permit penalty for violating Section 105.1 of the building code. So it is specifically for violating a law. Well, in the state building code, it says that you can charge a fee, but there's been no fee analysis on this. This has just been indoctrinated into a sanction. And it's completely wrong as what's going on. And the new language for the new amendment that has not been here before is now to uphold the discretionary policy that the county has had of withholding building permits until this is paid. So now they're trying to solidify it with this new amendment, and it's just creating a malaise of regulations that just aren't lawful from the inception. You guys are allowed to charge a fee for a violation permit, a violation of the 105.1, the building permit penalty, but it can't be called a penalty. It can only be called a fee, and if it's a fee, then it has to be in relation to cost. Now, if you guys are going to call it a penalty, the only sanctioning power that this county has for violating a law is 53069.4 of the government code. That is the only sanctioning power that you guys have.
Chris, could I ask you, do you represent an industry or?
Just private business.
Okay.
The other adoption section that's going through is, like they said before, a continuation of what's been happening since 1995, which is the disconnection of electricity that is completely unlawful. This usurps the Public Utilities Code, and I know SMUD has not really looked at this too far, and I've been in contact with SMUD recently about this. But it takes the state building code and the legislator's intent, which was the authority to disconnect the electricity in an emergency condition or exigent circumstances, as the Supreme Court has ruled upon. You can't deprive people of their public utilities just because they fail to comply with an order or they break a law. That's considered a sanction. If they do something that breaks the law, the remedy for that is a sanction. You can't disconnect people's power. And the way that they've adopted this language in 1995, I don't have the exact ordinance in front of me, but it was the original amendment, and the way they changed that was from the exigent circumstances to include a failing to comply with an order. And the term failing to comply is arbitrary. Nobody knows the definition of that. There's no definition in any law. And the definition of an order is also undefined in any section of law. So you just wrote a whole bunch of arbitrary language over state legislation that clearly defines what needs to be done. Disconnect electricity in exigent circumstances, and now you write a local amendment over the top of the state legislation, and they're calling it procedural. But it's not procedural. Procedural ordinances are only for implementation of violations of laws. That's not procedural in any way. This is substantive in all circumstances. And it is clearly an amendment of the building code. It's the same number as the building code, and in the legislation that they're presenting today, it clearly says amendment of the building code. And that's the reason why they're making findings inside of there, the 3 findings that are required. That's the reason why they're submitting it to the Building Standards Commission to try to make it look more legitimate. But this is clearly an amendment of the building code, and these are clearly sections of law that cannot be amended. You can add to them or add additional codes, but those are procedural. And this is clearly not procedural when you're disconnecting people's power and imposing punitive sanctions. And once you move from that section and create this malaise of legislation, you end up with lots of liability, which I know the county is very familiar with what's going on at this current moment with these. And that is the problem, these 2 ordinances. The rest of these ordinances are being adopted incorrectly, but it's not really creating any liability because they are actual building codes, even though they supersede other sections of the administrative code and the building code. It's not creating any liability. These 2 are creating liability, and it really needs to be looked at. 109.4 and 112.3 of the administrative code that's been happening since 1995.
Okay. Thanks, Chris. Let me stop you there then. Are any other questions of Mr. Lowell at this point, of his points? And you have submitted in writing, I think, pointing out what you just did verbally, and I know that's been transmitted. And I guess I would ask Robin, this can be back before us in 2 weeks. Obviously, this is the introduction, and I think Mr. Lowell and there may be others who raised issues, but I'm not aware of. I do think that it would probably be appropriate to look at that. There may be some other action that may be, related, but I think, he certainly points out changes that are being suggested and/or an affirmation be asked of this board of either what's in code or maybe what be in practice or not. And so I think that it would be worthwhile for us to have some exploration of that and then response from either Mr. Penrose or you, Robin, or whoever would be the appropriate party, and because this will be back before us in 2 weeks, and obviously Mr.
These
Lowe.
have been reviewed by council and will continue to be reviewed by council.
Okay. I do think that any specific points that again, may have been raised either here on the record and/or, if, again, I think there's enough interest in this matter, if we could at least have some brief response to that, it would be helpful for our consideration 2 weeks hence. I mean, as it relates to whether we agree or disagree, he raises issues about certain aspects of the code and our abilities. And if you recommend this, then you, I guess, have reviewed it for that fact. But I think he has submitted in writing, and again, we don't have to do a point-by-point response. But I do think that in light of what he's put on the record, it would be helpful for us to have that for the record.
I would just point out that the building code, as enacted by the legislature, is a minimum standard for this board and the state legislature to consider for the safety of those who are engaged in those activities. And that Mr. Lull's contact has been based upon penalties that are to encourage safe behavior, and his reaction has been to appeal those to the Superior Court in numerous actions, as well as federal court. So we are circumspect in our communications with you because you are a defendant in that action, but we will certainly get you something that will set your mind at ease as to this ordinance.
Okay, and that's fine. Again, and I did have a conversation with Chris when he asked about how this was going to be taken up, and he was, I'll just say in that conversation, was very clear he wasn't going to talk about the specifics of a case that obviously is in a venue that may be related because it relates to building codes and to disconnecting of electricity and so forth. But I think his point was that we have this property before us, that we have an administrative portion in addition to the state building portions that would be in effect whether we adopt them or not. And so I don't think it's, again, assuming you from a legal standpoint, don't think that jeopardizes any actions and/or defense that we, are considering a different venue. But again, I think the questions are legitimate ones, and hopefully we can have at least some response from council on that and building department. So,
one quick comment on that is the amendment to 112.3. Is it can be considered a lawful amendment, or it can be considered a procedural ordinance. But the problem is the language that was put in there, which is failure to comply with an order, is arbitrary and is being abused. And Rasmussen's decision to use it one way versus somebody's decision to use it another way can be construed differently, and there's no definition. But it's clear what the legislator's intent was, and the law as originally adopted was very clear, exigent circumstances only. So if you want to enact a procedural aspect of that, then make it clear. Make it a notification of an emergency condition or something like that, and don't amend 112.3. Make a whole nother section of law as a procedural ordinance, and then that way people can understand, look, this isn't the state building code, because now it's being amended and filed in the state offices. So
okay. All right.
That's my gripe.
Okay. Point understood. And again, when we're back again 2 weeks from now, and I trust we'll have a report back on the points you've made on that. So
okay.
Good. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Good. Anyone else? Mr. Lowell's the only one I had signed up. Anyone else on this? This is the introduction of the ordinance, and there's a couple of Mike. Anything else you wanted to summarize? All right. So with that being, then I guess the motion would be in order to introduce and then put it forward. And we may want to allow some time. Again, I trust we may have testimony from Mr. Lowe or from others on 24. So I think we should ordinance adoption or not allow for that 2 weeks in. So, yeah.
I believe you guys still need to adopt your consent matters.
Right. So
okay.
we can leave this. I guess leave it on consent calendar then. So.
Okay.
Move to adopt the consent calendar.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded then to approve the consent calendar. Anyone else here wish to address any item on the consent calendar? I had no other speaker forms. If not, then please vote.
Unanimous vote.
Okay, very good. Okay, we have some timed items in, and we have another speaker off agenda, but we're, go ahead and take the timed items.
Okay. For item number 33, it's the consideration of the 2017 federal and state legislative policies and procedures.
All right, Natasha Drain is here with her, and she has her husband with her today, and
Hi, good morning. Moral support. Yeah.
I just want to make sure that the board knows that I heavily advised her not to make this presentation. We could do it. We're not making somebody that's pregnant.
Is there a
9
doctor in
months.
the house?
So with that, Natasha, there you go.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair, members of the board. Natasha Drain, Governmental Relations and Legislative Officer, as read by Ms. Evans. Before you for consideration today are your 2017 proposed federal and state legislative policies and procedures. These policies, which provide direction on legislative and regulatory matters, are brought to you annually for consideration. And as part of the process of updating these policies each year, I ask that your county departments review them and provide me feedback on the best way to update them. The proposed changes reflect a collaboration between myself, your county departments, and your federal and state legislative representatives. The changes in attachments 1 and 2 are intended to strengthen your legislative policies and procedures. A few newly introduced policies are intended to be responsive to possible legislative or regulatory action in the coming year. And attachments 3 and 4 incorporate into a clean version the proposed changes in attachments 1 and 2. And then in attachment 5, this is the document that staff is proposing that you adopt today. Attachment 5 also incorporates the changes in attachments 1 and 2 into a new format. This new format combines the federal and state policies into one document. It includes a new table of contents and a short introduction, and provides a cleaner look, which I hope is easier for you to read. Before I finish, I do want to address one inquiry I received related to moving one of the newly proposed policy statements. You'll find in attachment 1 on page 5. Under letter H, healthcare access, there's a new policy statement related to Medicaid funding and using it more flexibly for promoting housing stability for persons experiencing homelessness. This policy statement, I'm recommending that we move it from H and move it into N for under homelessness services and housing. It's a better fit there. So should you choose to adopt the policies today, I would recommend that we make that change as well. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
okay, with that. Questions? Yeah. Mr. Cernan and Ms. Frost.
No, I just wanted to express my thanks for making the change you just mentioned. I was the one who caught the kind of the incongruous statement between two different subject matters in the same section, so I think it's appropriate to make the change that you've described.
Okay. Sue?
I just wanted to make a comment relating to the overall document was great. I felt like it represented the goals of the county and it was good government. There were 2 items that I had, I guess, some comments on. Item F regarding child care services. At the request of First Five Commission, a policy to support funding for subsidized preschool was added. I don't think we should be supportive of legislation that subsidizes child care and preschool for low-income families. I'm not sure that subsidizing child care is something that is it's kind of a political. It's political in nature, and it doesn't necessarily represent what the overall universal, mission of the county is. I'm not sure that's even, fits with our current mandate. It's like we're adding something to what we already have so many programs that we can't afford, and so promoting, it's like opening a new program. So I had concerns about that. And then item G talks about at the request of First Five, which the statement supporting legislation that promotes healthy nutrition and physical activity I think is great. That's what we should be doing, and the mission of First Five is really important for preventative, it prevents a lot of the problems that we already have. The problem I have relates to the policy statement to first five funding was amended to better reflect opposition to a reduction, redirection, or elimination of first five funding. So we're basically, I guess, drawing a line. I don't think we should oppose legislation that reduces or eliminates funding for first five. I don't think we should. I think during really difficult times, the county has worked really hard. They've had to be flexible. They've had to cut in some places at different times where they expanded in other areas as things changed. And so to write into policy to oppose cutting funding at this time, I'm not sure that is good.
Okay. All right. Yeah, Natasha, do you want to respond?
So maybe I can clarify a couple of things. First, under F, Child Care Services, this is an existing policy statement. What we've done is expanded that existing statement to include subsidized preschool. So it already included subsidized child care. That's a policy statement that has been consistent with the board's policy for some time now. And then secondly, under the G First Five Commission relating to redirecting funding, this is also an existing statement. The only thing we've done here is cleaned it up a little bit and strengthen it a little bit at the request of First Five. But both of these policies have been in the county's legislative platform for some time. So I don't know if there are any comments perhaps from the members of the board.
Which page? I'm kind of fumbling through
Page
here.
4.
Oh, that's attachment. Sorry about that.
Page 4,
Attachment 1,
2?
page 4.
Attachment 1, page 4?
Mm-hmm. Attachment 1, page 4. You'll see under the red line version at the bottom of the page.
That doesn't include the strikeout, though, right?
It does have the
This is for subsidized child care and preschool.
Got it.
Okay.
Okay. All right, any other comments on that? And we have the ability certainly to, not only to have discussion, we can, this doesn't require action on all elements today. Obviously, Natasha would like that because she might not be available if we were to put anything over, but that's not a driver behind this. And so if there are things that need to either be clarified and or, it's certainly responded to, we have time. We can take a balance of this and call out items if we choose to, or have separate
Or Sue
votes.
could vote no on those
Right.
two issues.
Yeah,
Exactly.
You know what?
Yeah.
Over the overall document, I'm,
Yeah.
98% of it
But
is
you can call
great.
it-
I'm
we can
not
call
going
it
to
on-
oppose. I'm not going to oppose it because of those two items.
But if you want to
I
register a no
wanted-
vote on those items, you can. We can do that too. We've
You
done
can
that.
say no on F and G, but yes on the rest.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that way, if that's where we get to. So you can do that, though. Any member can do
If
that.
you want to.
Yeah. Okay, Phil, did you want to?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to kind of respond to some of the comments made by Supervisor Frost. As chair of the First Five and as a supervisor that has arguably the poorest part of the county of Sacramento in his district, alongside Supervisor Kennedy with much of the north part of District 2, with the experience and understanding of how tenuous it can be to count on state funding for almost anything as it relates to county governance, but especially those support services for early education, I can't support enough what the change the change that has been made to item F under child care services with the addition of preschool. And I would encourage and invite Supervisor Frost to maybe have a conversation with me and with our First Five directors, so perhaps you understand a little better what those challenges are. Let me give you an example of just kind of what my thinking would be if we lost funding, state funding for some of these initiatives that First Five is charged with. I'd be the first on this board to ask our county executive to agendize how we're going to explore general fund monies from the county's budget to fulfill that. So without expressing support for state funding for something as important as early education, you can certainly count on me to raise the issue in June when we have our budget discussion. So I personally think we might even want to explore more forceful language in the future about the protection of these funds for such an important aspect of service delivery in this county.
Okay, Mr. Kennedy.
Yeah, I simply want to echo what Supervisor Cerna just said. I think that it's proven that preschool solves a whole lot of social ills for generations to come, and I can't think of anything that is more within the purview of the county or that is more important to the people of the county, particularly the low-income people that this is looking to help. So I just wanted to chime in and support what Supervisor Cerna just said.
Okay. Yes, Sue?
So I have not met with First Five yet. I had an appointment with them, and somehow we got canceled because of a board meeting, and I appreciate your comments. I might not have known the background, so I'm glad I brought it up. And so I can go ahead and support it, and thank you for your comments and clarification.
Okay, good, thanks. Other items? I know I have a couple, but I wanted, if I could, take us to the water and environment section.
Are you in attachment 1 or attachment 3?
I'm on attachment 3, I guess.
Okay.
That's because it has the...
Because we've made changes in both the state and federal policies related to water. So
Is it state and federal?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So if we're in attachment 3, that's the federal legislative.
Okay.
policies.
Well, and I assume that attachment 2 or 1 would be similar, but
Yes.
one of the things that is the qualifier that we have, that the footnote where it says all policies included in this document have been cross-referenced with the most recent legislative policies from SAFCA, the California State Association of Counties, the Urban Counties of California, and Sacramento Area Council of Governments, and are not inconsistent with any of the adopted policies from these agencies or associations. I guess my question to you, Tasha, we're not always in the same, march lockstep with some of those entities, and when it comes to water policy on a statewide level, particularly when it comes to the Delta, I'm not saying all of those, but there are some that, so I don't want this being so watered down, because what I see what was taken out as it relates in I don't disagree with the restatement, it's a pretty simple restatement, you took out the second sentence, but I guess I'm curious as to, again, it's one thing to look at that, and that can be a template by which you draw comparisons, but I guess I would just say very publicly that, consistent or not, if it's the right thing for the people of this county, even if we are in juxtaposition with another entity, and so be it, if we in this board's deliberations, and again, I don't make too much of this, but I just want, maybe you could explain, because maybe that's always the backdrop,
Yeah.
but whether we're consistent or not, if that to me is somewhat incidental. I would hope that we could find consistency, and most times we would, but there are some significant issues of a statewide and federal nature, particularly as it relates to the Delta and where they're going with the California water fix. And, I don't know where all those entities are, at a state or national level, but I got to imagine that some of them are not in the same frame of mind that we are. So.
I don't think it's meant that we wouldn't take a position different than some of these
Okay.
other entities or associations. It's simply just to say that from a broad perspective, from our policy platforms,
Yeah.
that it doesn't seem that we're inconsistent. But we certainly, we may interpret our policies differently than those organizations. So I could certainly see us possibly taking a position, and we have done so.
Well, we have. I mean,
Yeah.
again, I think our position, this board's position on Prop 53 early on last spring, that wasn't adopted universally, and obviously the voters weighed in and made a determination on that. But so why was it that with regards to the statement that we had in 2016 versus 2017, why did we take out actions that don't reduce or preempt the authority of the Sacramento County? We just boil it down and say it's consistent with principles of Delta Counties Coalition and I guess Regional Water Resources Coalition. Why the change?
Don, before she answers,
Yeah, sure.
I finally got to state water issues, but what number are you talking about?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I was looking at, I guess this is page 1, the red line version of attachment 3 is what I was looking at, which is the federal legislation.
Yeah.
The footnote, right?
Yeah, and the footnotes in the state
There was a
policies as well.
footnote at the
Oh,
bottom.
footnote, okay.
Yeah, footnote, I'm
All
sorry.
right.
Yeah, I wasn't real clear, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah.
We could certainly leave the last sentence in, Supervisor, if you'd like to support federal actions related to the Delta that do not reduce or preempt the authority of Sacramento County. the two additional statements that were added reflect that statement itself. So it's not meant to remove it. It was just meant that by adding number 2 and 3, we would actually strengthen that specific statement. But I see by removing it, to your point, that perhaps we should leave it in. And
Well, yeah,
we can do
because
that.
I guess I didn't, in reading this, Natasha, and I appreciate your explanation, is that I didn't take 2 and 3 to be an expansion of that sentence that was eliminated. I could see
Yeah.
where, as you've explained it, that could be the case, but
And
I
that's
just
what
think
number
we ought to
3
be
is
very
really
clear. I think we ought to be very clear about that at the state and federal level, particularly, again, when we're in the midst of this and have been for a number of years, and this board certainly has spent a good deal of time talking about those matters of significance. And I think, again, staff needs to make sure they have sufficient direction legislatively on this. Okay. Well, I guess I would suggest that maybe we leave in.
We can leave in that last sentence.
Yeah.
If
Okay.
you'd like to do that, we can certainly do that. And I was looking at on the state policies in attachment 1 on page 4.
Okay.
And that specific sentence is not in the state policies. So if we just leave it in here, we would be consistent.
Okay, it would be. All right. All right. That's the questions I had. Others about any segments of this? I'm sorry, Phil, you were up. And I think, Sue, you were punched up a minute ago, too. I'm sorry. Phil, go ahead.
Me?
Phil, yeah, go ahead. Now, come back to
Thank you. This is not necessarily very substantive. It's something I expressed in my briefing to our county executive. But it seems to me that these are more or better described as legislative priorities for this board and for this county versus policies and procedures. And it's just an opinion I'm expressing that perhaps in the future we may want to consider retitling what it is you're asking us to approve, to explore, help shape, and improve every year. To me, these are a list of legislative priorities. They're not policies that we're necessarily enacting or.
They're not broad enough for policy.
Yeah, and they're not procedures. Procedures are denote execution on behalf of us in my mind. So, to me, the better descriptor here is to use the word priority versus policies and procedures.
All right, good. Supervisor Frost? Sue, you had
No,
earlier.
I'm
Okay. All right. Any other questions for Natasha? Or
So may I
suggestions?
clarify what I've heard this morning about what what changes we have before us? So Supervisor Cerna just mentioned retitling the document, so you might want to consider doing that today as part of this. We've also talked about moving in attachment 1 under section H, statement number 5, we're going to move that down to end homelessness services. That's the recommendation for you today. And then leaving in the last sentence in attachment 3 under the federal policies, under A, Sacramento, San Joaquin Delta, leaving in the last sentence, support federal actions related to the Delta that do not reduce or preempt the authority of Sacramento County. So those are the 3 proposed changes that I've heard today.
I think covers it.
Okay. All right. I don't have anyone signed up to speak on this item. Is there anyone wish to speak to this item?
So,
Yeah, sorry, I don't.
if there are no speakers, and I would certainly move the list of state and federal legislative priorities for 2017 with the recommended changes.
Second.
Okay, it's moved and seconded, and nothing further, then please vote.
Unanimous vote.
Thank you, Natasha. And I would just, again, for Supervisor Frost, that just recognize that on specific legislation, these are, maybe priorities and gives direction to staff. But if there are specific legislative bills that where it's not clear, that they will come back to us. There's a process for doing that, and so we may later in the spring, depending upon what activity over at the Capitol, there may be some specific actions asked of this board on specific bills if it's not clear what the direction is given here. This covers most of the landscape, but not all of it. So,
Right.
very good.
All right.
Well, I guess this will be the last time we see you. Next time you'll be babe in arms, and
Hopefully,
so.
that's the goal.
Good luck, Natasha.
Yeah.
All right, thanks, Natasha.
All right,
Good.
thank
Good luck to you. Thank you. Okay, with that, then we'll move to the next item.
Item 34 is the state of the county's recycling and waste management system.
All right. Good morning, Doug.
Good morning. Flo, can I have the PowerPoint presentation, please? Good morning, members of the board. I am Doug Kobold. I am a program manager at the Department of Waste Management and Recycling, and I am in charge of our business development, contracts administration, and household hazardous waste programs. Back in May of last year, this board was, while discussing a tire fee and tire cost item, requested that we come back and give a report on the state of our recycling and waste management program. And so that is this presentation today. I'm going to cover three major topics today. Our operation is very large, as you may know, but these are some ones that I've wanted to key in on. So our facility operations, we run the Kiefer landfill and also the North Area Recovery Station. You'll probably hear me call it NARS more often than North Area Recovery Station. So also our north and south collections operations. Those two operations are predominantly defined by the American River, north or south of the American River. And then also I'm going to cover some of our market-driven contracts, because a lot of the contracts that come before this board tend to be allocated to various markets, as that's the nature of our business. Let's start with Kiefer landfill. So there's a lot of data on this table. I'm not going to go through it all. But I will touch on some of the highlights of the data. As you see at the top, received tonnages at Kiefer have steadily been going up. We're covering the last 6 fiscal years to kind of give you an idea of where we've been. The landfill tons have also gone up. Now, the primary driver behind that is we've entered into a lot of long-term contracts for disposal, either internally here in the county or with external service providers. But so that's why you see both of those climbing almost synonymously with each other. Also, you'll see that the recycling and reuse at the landfill has stayed predominantly steady. There have been some fluctuations, and I'll go into those in a little more detail as we go through. Some of the things I want to touch on: green waste. You'll see a significant amount of green waste there in the fiscal year 10-11, then it dropped off. One of those drivers for the dropping of the green waste is we actually started diverting it to our North Area Recovery Station, and so I'll cover that in the next slide where that is going now. But then otherwise it's been steadily dropping because of the drought, and so no other real good reason other than that. Some of the other items I'm going to cover today are going to be mattress program, specifically the e-waste program, our tires, which brought us here today, and also our recycle paint program.
Doug, just one moment. Mr. Cerna?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
So you're going to go into detail about some of these materials here, I assume.
That's correct.
In future slides here. But one of the things I was kind of curious about is this board, or four of us will remember probably 3 years ago, we had a real problem. I think it was carpet, illegal carpet disposal or collection. And are we seeing anything different in terms of that particular type of refuse that's being redirected at this point to the landfill?
Not currently, primarily because there is a state-mandated, state legislative program. It's called CARE, Carpet America Recovery Effort, that has been going on since 2010 when the legislation passed. And it has made unmarked progress, and actually is right now under an enforcement order by CalRecycle. So we haven't done any kind of programs in the county yet until we kind of see what happens with the state level, and until they work through this program, whether they continue with the current product stewardship organization that is controlling that, which is CARE, or are they going to move on with a new carpet organization. Full disclosure, I was appointed as a member of the California Carpet Council on recycling of carpet, so deeply involved in that.
Have you got them straightened out yet?
I tried. We did a lot of good work.
And that was a lot of material.
Oh, I know. Well, just to the point, though, are you seeing, what about the tonnage of the carpet that's just showing up out, and I know we get illegally dumped. I've got a couple locations I noted yesterday in my travels around the district where, a pile of carpet or padding or both show up out there. What are we seeing at the gate, though? Are you seeing, it's not all being redirected, I don't presume.
I wouldn't have that.
Buried?
I wouldn't have that number for you, Supervisor Natoli, because we don't typically track that. They come in with mixed loads. Certainly, the Carpet Council has been looking at that. CARE has been looking at that. I actually have an email out trying to determine what those tonnages might be, because what the impact is financially to the county on a $1 per square yard basis. So we could bring back information if you'd like.
I guess I would just ask to piggyback on Supervisor Cerna's question. That to me, Doug, would be, because I remember a few years ago on one of my visits to the landfill before the mattress program was in place, and I was just astounded. I mean, I knew about, but we were becoming the regional depository for mattresses because our rate was low, but we didn't have a statewide program and so forth, and it was just kind of incomprehensible at the time to see those large 50-foot rigs just pushing off mattresses and box springs and so now we've got a smarter way, and that Bye-Bye Mattress program, which you could probably touch to, has been on television quite a bit during the holiday season, and I've seen the ads. But on carpet, again, we know we can log that coming through this, particularly either NARS or through the gates at Kiefer. It would seem to me that with that tonnage, and maybe you do track that, but I guess I'd be curious to know, because I think for the work that you're doing as a member of that council, but beyond that, this county with a regional asset, but a regional, a landfill that certainly provides a good deal of opportunity both in county, but in some limited out of county. I would hate to see us become, again, taking up valuable landfill space with carpet, which can be recycled if it's handled appropriately and put to other uses, and just taking up, valuable landfill space forever and all time doesn't make sense to me. So I think that, information regarding that, maybe as a follow-on, would be useful.
We'd be happy to do so.
Okay, good. Thanks. Phil, anything else on? Okay, good. Go ahead. Thanks, Doug.
Okay. Moving on. Okay, so now I'm going to cover NARS a little bit, and we've seen similar trends at NARS. The tonnages have gone up. The disposal tonnages have gone up as a result of that. Your recycling percentages have stayed pretty stagnant. One thing that we have seen is the green waste at NARS. Again, as I mentioned earlier, we're starting to direct more of the tonnage of green waste away from Kiefer, where we use it as alternative daily cover to cover the or ADC to cover the active face area. But we've also seen the results of the drought, and so we're continuing to see a little bit of a decline there. I'm going to go into some of the value of the program we're running at NARS for the green waste in a later slide. Mattress program. You might have seen recently on the county news the little editorial that Brenda Borgiano put together, and to date, now this slide is a little bit out of date, but if you look at the total of mattresses collected and recycled, when we add in November and December, so a full year of the program, first year of the program, we've actually received 25,000 mattresses at the two facilities, and we have recycled over 22,000 of those. Now, some of those were disposed of early on because of program implementation problems or issues, or just the nature of a lot of rainfall, not quickly enough to get the mattresses out into the trailers and get them off before they get too saturated and have to be disposed of. But for the most part, we're recycling over 90% of those mattresses. And those were all going into the landfill in the past. And as Supervisor Natoli mentioned, we were the depository of those mattresses for quite some time because of our cheap rates. And this board approved a rate increase to try and dissuade the mattress collectors who were collecting from the retailers, who were collecting from the homeowners, and got them to stop bringing it to us and just landfilling it cheaply, but actually find other alternatives. The majority of those mattresses that we collect at the two facilities go to a mattress recycling facility over in Woodland called DR3, which is a subsidiary of St. Vincent de Paul. And also, as Supervisor Natoli mentioned, you probably have seen quite a bit, Bye-Bye Mattress. That's the Mattress Recycling Council. They have generated those ads. We were the second targeted area to get this blast, this media blast. They're waiting to see the results of the media blast and see how that's affecting consumer behavior.
Quick question, if I might, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
What happens when we have either individual or bigger episodic intervention by solid waste recycling with code enforcement action for illegal dumping. And I think we can all attest that in many cases the illegal dumping manifests itself with disposal of furniture and box springs and mattresses. So what happens when solid waste recycling is actually helping code in response to cleanups with those mattresses?
So those materials that can be recycled, we try to do so, or if we're legislatively mandated to do so, we will do that. With the mattresses, they are collected separately, and they are brought to either Kiefer or NARS, and they are added into the mattress recycling program. So we are not landfilling them unless they are in such bad shape that the recycler can't take them.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question.
Sure.
So the Bye-Bye Mattress Media Blast, has that already started, or when does it? I haven't seen anything myself, so it sounded like it had already started. Maybe I missed it.
Yeah, I think I started seeing them on the television ads and hearing them on the radio about 2 months ago.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I had another question. When typically, at least now, when you buy a new mattress, the store takes your old mattress. So do the stores take it to a pass-through agency, or do they just deliver it to your facility?
So according to the law, the retailers are mandated to offer free take-back of the mattress. They are not supposed to be bringing them to our facilities, and we actually have our scale attendants watching for any potential retailers, either through a third party or themselves bringing them back. They are required by the mattress recycling program to haul those directly to DR3, for example, in Woodland.
Okay. So it's a direct transfer
That's correct.
to the Woodland facility. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Continue.
Our e-waste program, this has been another successful program driven by state mandate. Actually, prior to that was also driven by a landfill ban on cathode ray tubes way back in the day when a lot of us had CRTs in our homes. Those used to pile up on the side of the road as well, and there was no way to get rid of them. So the state banned them, and then realized after the local government started paying $200 to $300 a ton to get rid of those materials, something else needed to be done. So another product stewardship program was implemented at the state level, and that is the e-waste program we see today that is administered by Cal Recycle. To date, in this e-waste program, since we started separately collecting and recycling these, we have recycled over 13 million pounds of e-waste that would have gone into landfill. So it's a fairly significant waste stream and problematic one that has now been resolved. Another aspect of this is I want to talk a little bit about our current contract. I alluded to earlier that we were going to talk about market-driven contracts. E-waste, when it started the program, there was a lot of value in the commodities of the recycled materials that are pulled out at the back end. Those markets have gone down, and as a result, it's been more difficult for our contractor to be able to recycle those at even a reasonable profit. And so earlier, this board approved an amendment to the contract that we have with the California Electronic Asset Recovery, SEER, and to go to a market-based approach. And so now we are fluctuating with the markets alongside our contractor so that he can continue to operate. So there was more detail on that in that last board item.
Just one quick question, if I could, on this. So for those that don't go to some, there are events at schools and different nonprofits that hold events for disposal, school groups and so forth, but they can go to NARS, they can go to Kiefer, and can they go to the Elk Grove? Do we have an agreement with the Elk Grove facility for receipt of these, or no?
So Elk Grove at their convenience center does receive e-waste, and there's no agreement necessary between us and Elk Grove for that particular material. We do have it.
Unincorporated area residents could go there, Doug?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
For that, how about for household hazardous waste, though?
So we have a quid pro quo agreement in place with Elk Grove for their HHW facility, as well as the city of Sacramento, so that no matter where you live in the county, you can go to one of the 3 or 4 facilities. We also have a recycle-only antifreeze, batteries, oil, and paint facility at Kiefer. So there are 4 options in the county for our residents or even residents of the cities to go to those locations and recycle their household hazardous waste.
How do you get the word out about that so that, again, because just to the point that I think we see less of some of these items on the roadside, but, again, just in my travels yesterday, saw CRT and a printer and several mattresses. How do you get the word out besides being on a website or you do an annual mailing with the schedule, I guess, and that has some brief information. I mean, what you can get on page either side, but. If somebody wants to take the initiative and actually going to, the time to drive it to the proper location, to know that they don't show up there, and I loaded all this stuff up, and guess what? You told me that either I got to pay for it or this isn't the right spot to bring it to. So I think having reciprocal agreements is a good part of that. But what do we do by way of information to, I think, reinforce with folks, maybe new residents, but folks that have these items accumulate and they want to do the right thing and know that they can dispose of, in a lot of cases, without cost, except for their time and effort to drive it to the location. So how do we get the information out there? I guess that's my question.
So you're correct, Supervisor Natoli. Currently, it's primarily the website and then any flyers that we may send out on a periodic basis. But a few years back, we actually did a media blast, and we ran 9 different 30-second television ads on KCRA 3, and then we subsequently ran those again about a year or so later through Comcast, and we're able to target our audiences with those. And so it's probably about time to do it again.
Okay. Well, I started to think through access cable again. Metro cable. There was public information there, but I think this is one of those things where you can freshen it up, and I think there's been some programs, even since maybe the last time you ran some of those ads, which obviously have a cost associated with them. Hopefully there's some return in a good way. But I guess I would suggest that that's one of those things where, you don't want to just put it out there and pay for it and don't know that you're having some impact. But I think there are some sources that you can go to, media and otherwise. And again, I don't know if we have a Facebook page or whatever. I mean, obviously the county does, but this is the type of thing where I think you could, people are hungry to do the right thing, and for the most part. And if it doesn't get done the right way, then we end up through the illegal dumping program and or through some other initiatives of spending, taxpayer and ratepayer money to clean it up anyway. So I think that, we ought to look at that, and I guess I would encourage solid waste and recycling to, look at, again, the approach we've taken, but also maybe to look at re-energizing that a bit, if it's practical to do so.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, one of the reasons we're here today, we were talking about tires in the past and the rates of those tires. So you can see by the graph here, there's not been a huge amount of change in the tires that we get at the facilities. That's stayed pretty stagnant. One of the key reasons we don't see as many on the road is in 1990 when the Board of Supervisors passed a resolution to allow the first 4 passenger car tires and light truck tires to come in for free. That's made a significant difference on the illegal dumping of tires. It doesn't eliminate it, but certainly makes a good difference on it. The other item here is the reason we were here in May was because of the change in markets again. This time it was a different reason. It wasn't maybe the Asian markets changing or anything like that. It was the crumb rubber issue that came up, and it actually caused the cancellation of a lot of synthetic turf fields. So it caused kind of a crisis in the rubber tire aspect for recycling. And so we had to respond to our contractor who had to increase our costs, and so we had to do that take that action. This board had to take that action back in May.
I just looking at that picture there reminds me, though, is worry about kind of the rising water and the period we're in right now, this wet period. Mm-hmm. But in 1986, there was several 100,000 or a few 100,000 tires that were scattered throughout the north area. That there was a accumulation out there, and the waters rose. And
we'll hear about it from mosquito abatement later in the year.
Yeah, and tires were everywhere. I mean, we went cross country, and there were some other locations. One down in the southern part of the county, in the east area, where we had, they didn't float away, but just tens of thousands of tires that were there, and then they caught on fire and burned for days. And so I think a lot of progress has been made, and I think those large stockpiles certainly aren't as evident, even probably statewide because of the program. But I think the illegal dumping the tires that we used to see along sides of the road in great numbers, pickup loads and truckloads and so forth, don't see nearly as many of those, at least in the areas that I'm familiar with. So again, I think it's showing some good progress, as you said, Doug.
Okay. Another program that is fairly recent, well, the legislation was passed in 2010, was the paint recycling and diversion program. This is another stewardship program that has been run by the company called Paint Care. You probably saw their bulletin boards, you've seen their ads in the Bee. This program has been very successful for the county because we are now saving about $150,000 a year on average in avoided costs that we would have been paying, and we were paying prior under our contract with our household hazardous waste transporter and disposing and recycling company. So this program has been very well received by our customers at the facilities, and I think we're slowly seeing a lot of the paint that was stored in garages coming out and getting and most of it is getting recycled through one of our local paint recycling contractors. I'm going to touch a little bit on our county collections. We collect on a daily basis from 150,000 households in the county. There's an additional 5,000 in the south area, mostly in Supervisor Natoli's district, that are collected by a contractor, Waste Management Inc., under a very specific contract. But they receive all the same services under that contract. Those residents receive all the same services that our residents do that we service. As you can see, the garbage has not changed much at all. It's been pretty flat throughout the last 6 years. Green waste, as I've discussed earlier, has actually just kind of declined, and that is a result of the drought primarily. Recycling has also stayed pretty steady. ABNCU, that has fluctuated a little bit here and there. I'm going to touch on those three items a little more in detail. Another item that is worth of noting is the illegal dumping. As you can see, that has actually gone down due to the efforts of this board and also our department to try and curb that and get it cleaned up as quickly as possible.
Question, Mr.
Sure, yeah.
I know that our county executive has probably had a conversation or two as of late with solid waste and recycling about your involvement, hopefully much more engagement in the effort to clean up the American River Parkway, working with a comprehensive team of folks to make sure that we're addressing reports of illegal dumping that actually happen in the parkway, not just in the district I represent, but along its entire length. Are we going to get at some point some idea about how much tonnage, or some brief summary about general activities of solid waste recycling as it relates to cleanup on the American River Parkway? I know that this conversation was pretty recent, so you may not have any stats or data to share, but it seems to me that would be one of the bullet points and one of the columns or rows that you might want to add to your matrix in the future.
Yeah, I'll weigh in on that. Supervisor Cerna, Paul Filio, Director of the department. Traditionally, Parks has contracted individually for waste services, and they utilize the services of one of our Solid Waste Authority franchisees. Right now, they're using Republic Services for bin service, and we really haven't been very much involved in the Parkway issue. That is starting to change. We are now starting to have conversations with the Department of Parks to do some more mutual aid, potentially purchase some specific equipment that will be very well suited for the parkway, because they struggle right now with the equipment they use, and they have to do a lot of handwork. And we think our experience in doing bulky waste collection is something that we can lend to them. We're actually including some potential equipment in our capital improvement program to help with that. But we would probably still work in conjunction with our private haulers, because they also have a lot of capability. But that is something that has just recently taken on.
That's music to my ears, because I know we've been in, and I want to publicly thank Supervisor Natoli, because I know, having had a discussion or two with him and he with our county exec, have helped promote the creative thought process as to how we can begin to flank our parks maintenance folks and our commercial haulers that we have contracts with. It seems to me that that needs to be a very prominent part of the general effort to keep our parkway as clean as possible for our constituents.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I just want to speak to, thank you, Phil, for your comments. Paul, while you're there, my conversation sort of with Nav, and I'm sure that's, been translated or transmitted to you, but it's an enterprise fund, and again, you and your folks have done a good job in managing that enterprise on behalf of this county and this board. And again, certainly taking care of the assets that we have and doing what you're called upon. But when I look at the American River Parkway and certainly the challenges we've had as it relates to some of the camping activities, but I think the trash and debris that's left behind as a result of a variety of activities, but and the accumulation of waste that, again, the skill set that your department, certainly our private providers, provide that service, but I think getting into nitty-gritty of equipment and maybe even manpower, people power, to allow us to be more nimble, but also to stay up with the not just the mountains of trash that accumulate, but to really to do that effectively. And again, in an area that you have expertise in, and certainly rangers have done that along with other folks who may have been employed to do that. I just think we have an opportunity for that 23-mile long jewel and all the thousands of acres that encompasses to really, again, use solid waste and management and recycling and your knowledge and expertise, but can reckon that there's a funding stream that again we don't want to take from, but I think it'd be a complement to working with parks and so that and to really marry those up. And so I appreciate certainly your leadership, Nav taking it, and certainly Phil's leadership on the issue. And I mean it's a constant. And so whether it's summertime or wintertime, I think we have the ability to do a lot better out there, and again to maybe overcome part of the problem that we've seen, and it's continue to be, I think, a scourge on that parkway, and then I think the whole public health aspect. That's why we collect garbage and and certainly materials that we don't want either buried or on our streets or in streams. And you look at those accumulations, and when the high water comes, it may move it, but it moves it away somewhere else, and that's not good. And so I think that we can do much better than we've done in the past, and I think the solid waste and recycling can be a real strong partner. So I too look forward to the opportunity up and down that parkway from the lower end to the far reaches on the east end, of finding ways that we can work with your department and certainly maybe recover some of those costs. But if it's a part of us doing business and having a cleaner and I think a more aesthetically pleasing and certainly environmentally friendly parkway to complement what we do out there, then I think we're all going to be better served by that. So appreciate it, Paul.
You can count on us.
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to dive a little deeper into a couple of the programs I mentioned earlier. Green waste. So we've been collecting green waste since 1997. I think Supervisor Nicholi was there when that first started up with Zone 1. And the costs were continuing to rise for this program to process this material, turn it into a composting type product. So in 2006, we ventured upon an opportunity, which was to divert our softball wood and brush and some portion of our green waste into a biomass fuel for energy production. That program proved to be very effective, and we turned it into a long-term program. And today, it saves about $1 million a year in avoided costs on our program to be able to divert that material to now our contractor, Old Durham, up in Durham, California, by Chico. Our single stream recycling program. This was put into effect in April of 1998, replacing our 3-bin program that was implemented in 1990. That one does predate Supervisor Natoli.
Is that the historical reference you're going to use now?
You can't say that about many things.
Antiquities here. Yeah.
I did have to look that up to make sure that statement was correct. So, in March of 2006, we had changed from a market-based contract, because that contract fluctuated with the market indices, and the budgeting for that was all over the place. And so we felt, okay, let's try and take advantage of a fixed price, get our contractor to commit to it, and run that out. And that ran out for 7 years. What we unfortunately found out is that during that time frame, we missed a couple bumps. And attachment 1 to the board item today reflects that variation in the market. But so with the stabilization of the enterprise fund and us being able to help our contractors take some of their risk away of guaranteeing us a price, we went back to the market-based approach in 2013, and that's where we are today. And at this point in time, we're averaging about $800,000 a year in revenue for the single stream materials. And we're diverting about 38,000 tons a year of material away from the landfill. Our neighborhood cleanup program, we've talked about that a little bit already, so I'm not going to dwell on this too much more, except for that we did make some changes. We used to be on this canvas-wide service approach by calendar. We incurred a lot of illegal dumping on those piles as a result, and quite a bit of scavenging as well. So in 2006, we changed over to an appointment-based approach, eliminated a lot of that illegal dumping, and reduced the amount of tons we were collecting from the facility, from the curbside. As a result, the other change we made recently is we've gone from sending out a second set of equipment to collect wood waste, for example, separately out there in the neighborhoods, to taking about 50% of our material and sending it through one of our local C&D processors, who is also doing other work for the C&D trade. So that has resulted in a 75% reduction in disposal volume for those materials we send to that vendor, and not a huge increase in cost over what we were doing before.
Can I ask a question? The truck, the two images that you have there of the truck, I don't know if it's the same truck or two different trucks, but how many of these trucks do we have?
So the one at the top is our LNG version of the truck, and it's the older version. And now we have below on the left is our new CNG trucks, and we have five of them out there. We call them our knuckle booms.
Okay, so these knuckle booms, that's what you deploy for calls for illegal dumping, code enforcement calls for illegal dumping?
Yeah, that and also they do all help out with the NCU program. Those trucks are the ones we use to pick up the appliances, the e-waste, any of those materials we can't landfill. Can't go in the back of one of our rear loaders. They end up in one of these trucks and then are taken to the facilities for recycling.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Patrick.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Paul and I have had this discussion, so I just wanted to one more time say it for the record regarding, it's kind of regarding neighborhood cleanup because it leads to the need for neighborhood cleanup, but I really want to see us continue to work with the Rental Housing Association and other organizations to come up with a solution to the problem that we have with the illegal dumping at the end of every month, particularly mattresses and things like that, I mean, we can set our clocks by them and know they're going to happen.
Yeah, and this is sort of the business end of what happens when we're not successful preventing it, but through a lot of the initiatives that you have approved with your SWA hats on, we are hoping to see that start to change.
Yeah. Thank you.
I would concur with Patrick. And again, whether you're in the suburban setting or rural setting, come to end of the month, mattress and couches and washing machines and household debris, you can mark your calendar by it. So, okay, we're good. Doug?
Okay. As I alluded to earlier, I would talk a little bit about our market-driven contracts. As you can see, we have quite a few of our contracts that are based on indices to try and take the sting out of the contractor's risk, and then also we get to enjoy when the markets do go up. And like I had mentioned earlier, they are down right now, but they are recovering, and so we're seeing increases across the board in a lot of the materials you see in front of you. I did want to touch a little bit on one of the unique things that we're doing in this county that is unique, I know, in the state and possibly in the nation, is when we buy our new curbside containers, and we purchase about 25,000 of them a year, about a $1.5 million expense in our budget. We've actually tied the cost of those carts to a market index for new resin, so that when oil prices are down like they are right now, we're enjoying a cheaper rate on our cans than we would have otherwise had we gone to a fixed rate contract with typical CPI escalators. And so this has been, I've been told this is very unique. Our vendor seems to be okay with it. We're working real well with it, and it's saving the ratepayers money over the long haul.
Okay, good.
Bottles and cans have come up recently statewide with the closure of a lot of redemption centers. They're called the AB 2020 centers, and these are the ones where you can take back your bottles and cans and get your nickel or dime back. while we don't have any control over this, this is a state program. It's run by the state. The state is desperately trying to fix the bottle bill, and hopefully they will come up with some solutions. But in the meantime, a few things have happened recently. The legislation I show on the slide in front of you, SB 842, actually did die in the legislature, but the reason I put this on here is this is the type of impact that might happen to the county and to our revenues. Those three items I list there are cumulative $500,000 a year in revenue we get from our single stream program. If that bill would have passed, we would have lost that $500,000. And so we're paying close attention in the legislature to what happens with this bottle bill and what happens in the regulatory realm as well, to make sure that our residents are protected as much as possible. And when there aren't options conveniently available for our residents, they have their single stream container where they can put those materials in, and they will get recycled through our recycling facilities that we contract with.
One question?
Okay. Yeah. Ms. Peters.
Can we go back to the redemption centers, the AB 2020, and maybe fill me in a little bit on that? Because in my district, we've been closing recycling centers because of all the problems that it creates. Obviously, there are lots of people with kids that want to teach their children the proper way to dispose of bottles and cans, and so it's a problem for them to reduce the number of places. So tell me more about this bill.
So the bottle bill was initiated way back a long time ago, and sorry I don't have the date in front of me right now, but the program has become insolvent. The state is actually running at a $100 million a year deficit on a $1.4 billion a year program. They recycle 24 billion containers every year, but it's become too successful. And part of that is the legislative fixes they tried to create in the history of this bill to deal with large amounts of excess money. And so these three programs I list here are parts of that fixed because they couldn't hold on to the money, so they were distributing it to the cities and counties to try and offset the cost of collecting these materials. But more recently, while there have been local government actions taken with these AB 2020 centers because of issues of blight, et cetera, the bigger driver, we've lost 50% of the AB 2020 centers statewide because of one of the largest operators of that type of facility closed many of their locations because the markets for this material have gone down, and the state was not able to, and not nimble enough to be able to respond to these changes in the markets, and so these companies were losing money, and so they had to shut down these facilities in order to keep the ones they could open.
So are some of those, can you name some of them? Or one? Are these the kind of facilities that we would see typically in a grocery store parking lot?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah,
so that's why they've disappeared, is because they're no longer profitable.
Correct.
And these are, I think, materials were headed west to China and places, and they don't have as much need for the product, right?
Yeah, and those operators were primarily relying on the salvage value of the material because they're redeeming that nickel and dime, and so there's no value for them, and they get a really small smidgen of the value of that nickel as an administrative fee, but the primary driver for them was the market value of the material, which has dropped, and hence why they've shut down a lot of their operations.
So have you seen an increase in the recycling coming into you?
We've talked about that. We haven't done a characterization study in quite a while, but we've certainly talked about it. Are we seeing more in the stream? That takes a very detailed study to determine what % is coming into our single stream program.
Yeah, just curious. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Good.
Organics recycling. I've spent a little time talking about green waste, so I'm not going to belabor that one. But some new ones that are on the horizon for us. While food waste is the largest one, food waste represents approximately 20% of what is still going into the landfills today, according to the state information. half of that, a good part of that material right now is being addressed under AB 1826, which was recently passed by the legislature to require the diversion of food waste from commercial establishments. And there's a tiered structure on when that all has to happen. The SWA board has been dealing with that, the implementation of that. And so I'm sure most of you are very familiar with that. So I won't go into much detail there. But one thing that is on the horizon for us is there is a potential at some point we could be required from state mandate to start providing food waste at the curb. And if we do that, we are very aware of that. We're watching this closely to make sure that we can be nimble and respond to that change and that legislative change if necessary.
Wow. That'll be hard.
Yes.
What does all this mean to the ratepayers? Another big table, lots of data. But the key point with this table is over the last 6 fiscal years I've covered with this presentation today, we have saved either through cost avoidance or revenue generation about $18 million for the enterprise fund and for our ratepayers at either the curb or at our facilities. Some of the bigger drivers there are, again, the cost avoidance with the green waste program through our contract up at NARS. Our single stream contracts have generated a significant amount of revenue. Our metals, while they're low in tonnage compared to a lot of the other materials, they are high value. Even today, they're still decent value on them. And then also our e-waste program. That's generated quite a bit of revenue as well. That's the end of my presentation. I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Well, thank you, Doug. Good report. Other questions? I'm kind of questioning as we went along, but anything else board members like to know?
Thank you. Very interesting.
Good report. And again, thank you. And Paul, you didn't have to do a lot of the presentation today, so we'll see you again, though, right before March?
Yes, he will be here.
Okay, good. All right. I didn't say anything else. I just asked him when to see me before March, so okay, good. Thank you. Thanks. Okay, that was just a receive and file, and again, we thank the department for preparing that and Doug for presenting it. So, okay. Flo, back into our agenda. We do have some off-agenda speakers, and we'll get to them in a moment, but we have a couple more items we need to get to. So.
Item 35, these are your nominations. You're continuing to January 24th, the In-Home Supportive Services Advisory Committee. You're continuing to February 7th, the Assessment Appeals Board, Local Child Care Planning and Development Council, Sacramento County Redevelopment Successor Agency Oversight Board. You're continuing to February 28th, the Cemetery Advisory Commission, County Service Area 4C Delta, Delta Citizens Municipal Advisory Council, Disability Advisory Commission, Maternal, Child, and Adolescent Health Advisory Board, North Highlands Foothill Farms Community Planning Advisory Council, Orangeville Community Planning Advisory Council, Sacramento County Treasury Oversight Committee, the Southeast Area Community Planning Advisory Council, and the Vineyard Area Community Planning Advisory Council. And for your matters today, your first one is the Adult and Aging Commission. Chair Natoli.
Okay, the Chiefs recommend Carrie Votman and continue remainder to February 7th, 2017.
Was that February 7th?
February 7th,
okay.
Yes.
For the Cordova Community Planning Advisory Council, Supervisor Peters.
No applicants, so if you would please continue to February 28th.
And Supervisor Natoli?
Yes, we had one applicant we've interviewed and would recommend nominating Aaron Heath.
Okay.
And then continue remainder to February 28th as well.
Okay, you're okay with that? Okay. The Developmental Disabilities Planning Advisory Council.
Okay, the chief staff have interviewed and we're recommending reappointment of Amy Jensen, incumbent in professional category, and Roger Chapman in the public category, and continue remainder to February 28th as well.
Okay. Next, we have the Equal Employment Opportunity Advisory Committee. Chair.
Okay, the chief staff has done interviews, recommending Michael Burks, incumbent, and along with Jessica Waterford, and then continue remainder to February 7th, 2017.
Okay. We have the Human Services Coordinating Council.
Okay. Again, chief staff have been interviewed and recommending reappointment of the incumbent Raymond Kemp.
Okay. Next is paratransit.
The incumbent has been interviewed by, as well as any other, by the chiefs. They're recommending reappointment of Barbara Youngling Faust.
Okay. Public Health Advisory Board.
Recommending Carol Jong, community member, Farla Kaufman, public health professional, and Martha Moon, public health professional, and I guess continue. I don't know if that's correct. I have continued to February 7th. Did you have that on your notes as well?
I do have that we're continuing
The community member is
the
the community member to be continued? Is that what I
the
take?
community member seat.
Okay, let's continue that one then. But the public health professionals, those seats are being recommended.
Okay. That-
Or they recommend from? Again, I'm just not clear on my notes.
I don't see the
Let's
notes.
let's continue this in its entirety to February 7th. Let's do that. Make sure that I don't have the note about the interviews by the district offices. So
Okay.
so we'll continue that entire matter till February 7th.
Okay. Sacramento County Alcohol and Drug Advisory Board.
Okay, continue a portion of this on the interview for one of the applicants, but there's a recommendation from the chiefs to reappoint the incumbent, one of the incumbents, Jennifer Churchill,
Okay.
and continue the remainder to February 7th.
Got it. And now we're with the Sacramento County Mental Health Board.
District 1 would like to continue its appointment to January 24th, please.
Okay.
And,
District 2 would also like to continue till January 24th.
okay.
District 3 would nominate Catherine Bird to the public interest seat for District 3.
Got it.
Okay.
Now we're with the Sacramento County Youth Commission.
District 1 would like to continue its appointment to February 7th, please.
Supervisor Peters.
Nominate Luke Delcour as the District 3 Youth Commissioner.
Okay. Supervisor Frost.
And District 4 would like to continue to February 7th, please.
Likewise, District 5, February 7th.
And that concludes your nominations.
We did have a speaker on this before we take any action that's required. So, Martha, you'd signed up to speak. No. She may return, but she had initially signed up for item 36, but it was 35 she wanted to speak to. So,
Okay.
okay, all right. Do we need any other action then, Flo?
Nope.
Okay.
That's concluded. For item 36, this is for the board to consider appointments from their own ranks to various boards and commissions.
All right, we have quite a list here, and I know we've had a chance to look this over, so I'm going to turn to my colleagues. We can take action on all this portion of this today, and I think Flo can help walk us through this. So what's the kind of the preference of the board? I know.
Start at the top and read through them.
All right.
Okay, so the first one is the Adult and Aging Commission. You do have expired terms, and you have you do need to appoint someone.
You could help us by telling which districts need to appoint.
My favorite matrix.
I hear you. So this is a chair or ex officio member or chair designee.
Okay, well, chair doesn't have a designee as of yet, so we can continue that. And again, if there's some interest I would just say by my colleagues at you or your staff members, I know that some years ago that both Mamie E. attended for a while, and I think Lynn did at one time as well for maybe for, I think, Susan at one time. So anyway, if there's an interest by a chief of staff or staff member, if not, we'll try to find someone appropriately. Okay. And again, it's important connectivity with the Adult and Aging Commission, so give us a couple of weeks to have that conversation.
Absolutely.
Maybe you can talk with the various offices, Flo, and see if there's some interest, and if not, then we'll continue to pursue this. So
Okay, I'll put a note on here that we'll continue this to the 24th for now.
Because I see that what was done a year ago, January almost, it was referred to chiefs of staff, no appointment was made, so I don't know what happened there. So I guess we had a vacated seat for better part of a year.
I
Which
think Mimi was the last one.
Yeah. So, again, maybe we could have some conversation with, our chiefs of staff. I know they meet on the other appointments, if there's some interest. If not, then
Rather than bring it back, I'd just soon refer it to the chiefs of staff and let them get back to us when they have some information to impart.
Okay.
That'd be my thought.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
That's fine. We referred it to them a year ago, and so we're re-referring it, and again, asking for their input. So good suggestion, Susan. Okay. All right.
Next is the Area 4 Agency on Aging Governing Board. So it looks like we have a vacancy for the alternates, for Supervisor Frost and for the chair, Natoli.
I'd like to request more time, if I could, please.
Okay.
Not a problem.
And on this too, that supervisors, and I know members of this board have attended either frequently or from time on occasion, and so again, I just point out for you, Sue, that if you chose to, you certainly could attend as a supervisor and or appoint, but more time is fine. But we can, as far as
I need an alternate, and this is what I need
as far as
to.
alternate, we can bring an alternate back, but again, we.
Yeah, I can serve, but I
Okay.
don't have an alternate yet.
All right.
And Mr. Natoli, you have a vacant alternate seat as well.
And I'm not going to appoint an alternate, so I choose
Okay.
not to. So. Okay.
And then we do not need to take any action on the Cal ID RAN board.
Sorry, I'm sorry to interrupt. Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Does the alternate the alternate does not need to be an elected, and you're not choosing an alternate because you make every meeting? Is that?
I do my best. I won't say I make every meeting, but I do my
He's the
best.
best. He has the best. attendance.
I don't have to
He
have
makes
an
every
alternate.
meeting.
Okay. And then if I don't have an alternate,
And
then
hopefully you might be able to attend now and then.
Yeah, like this Friday at 10 o'clock.
okay, I guess
It's
I
okay.
need-
Again, there's plenty of understanding, and again, the county's been well represented there, and we've got
Yeah, right.
some pretty detailed process to go through relative to funding and so forth. But I think there's sufficient time if you wanted to, if you wanted your chief of staff, if you, Sue, wanted to attend to, until you were able to find a. So we can appoint you, but if you're not able to, it's understandable too, because again, it's pretty short notice.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, next is the Cal ID RAN board. I do want to point out that you don't have to take any action, but Ted Walter is sitting as your alternate, Mr. Natoli.
Okay, and again, I haven't had a conversation with Ted. I know he's left, county service, and this body meets to talk about live scan and fingerprinting and some of the funding that comes from the state. And in the past, we've had a chief of staff or designate one of the offices to serve in that capacity. So I will let me have that conversation with our staff. Now, maybe you can pull together a little information about that board meets once or twice a year, as I recall.
That's correct,
There's some
yeah.
funding recommendations that come through. And again, I would just say to my colleagues, if you have member of your staff to be interested in doing this, certainly as chair, I'm more than happy to consider that. And if not, to find somebody that would. Again, there's some pretty important work, but I don't think it requires. It's not a big workload. And if a member of this board, I know many years ago I served on it for a brief time. So if one of you would be interested as well, so maybe we can bring that one back, Faye, when we're ready to.
Okay.
All right.
Next is CSAC, California State
Flo,
Association.
excuse me, I said Faye. I don't know why I said Flo.
Oh.
I thought you had the wrong name, so it's good. Sorry.
I thought we already did that one in October or November.
I just want to call it out that you don't have to do anything for this item because we did take action on that. November 1 is the expiration. So if it's highlighted in blue, what that means is that we've already taken action in the previous year. But just going down the list so we don't lose our place. Next, we have Capital Southeast Connector Authority Board of Directors. I do want to point out that the previous person who was sitting on this board was an alternate. That was Supervisor Roberta McGlashan. This would be a discussion of at the board.
So, again, I'm prepared to continue to serve in that capacity. They meet.
I would like to be an alternate or whatever's open, just because it's in my district and I have an interest in supporting it.
Okay. All right, I'm fine with that. I think it'd be great.
Good.
So, I do my best. I don't get to all those meetings either, but I know Roberta wasn't called upon too many times to sit in, but we can coordinate on that. So,
Okay, thank
good.
you.
All right.
Okay. Next is the County Leadership Advisory Committee. We do not need to take any action on that unless you want to appoint an alternate. Mr. Natoli?
Criminal Justice Cabinet?
No.
Oh,
No, the County Leadership Advisory Committee.
when does this meet?
I don't even know what that is.
Yeah, what is it?
Let's leave it the same and move on.
The same being who? Me? I don't even know what it is.
I'll get you
Did
more
a fine
information.
job.
It's
Expatriate.
Your name's on the row.
I know, I'm looking at it.
I've never attended one. So.
Okay, so why don't you and I, Mr.
Yeah, we'll
County
do so.
Executive, again, in all seriousness, again, if this is a body, I guess I would, certainly as chair, make myself available.
I mean,
For what leadership that would show, but at any rate.
Yeah, you guys volunteered me last year for this one.
Okay.
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 Next is the Criminal Justice Cabinet. We do have some expiring terms, and that would be for Supervisor Kennedy and also Supervisor Peters. And Supervisor Peters is sitting as the alternate. Mr. Kennedy, you're the member.
I'm interested in
Okay.
remaining.
I'm not interested, so,
I'm interested.
okay.
Okay,
There we go.
there you have it. Sold.
Okay, so Kennedy
I'm
is
alternate.
going to remain
Yes, we'll make it the alternate, if you're okay with that.
Okay, so Kennedy is going to remain the member, and then Supervisor Frost will be the alternate.
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
Next, we have the Delta Protection Commission. We do not have any action to take on that. That term doesn't expire until the 2018. We do have the Downtown Sacramento Partnership, and there has been a request to remove this from the own ranks list, but I thought it would be appropriate for the board to make that decision.
Okay, is there something in the enabling formation of that required the county to have a seat? I know there's been interest,
The
kind of off
request-
again, on again over the years, but.
I would ask the board to allow me to research that. That request came in relatively soon after this was distributed, and we would like to research the documents to just verify that that would be okay, and we'll work with county council as well.
This is the first I've heard of this kind of uncertainty or confusion about this. Is it? I'm going to assume that there's maybe an expression to remove this because it is so geographically specific to District 1, and so why would we even
Have it on
have
ranks.
it on here? If that's the case, I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Next, we have the First Five Sacramento Commission. I do want to point out that Supervisor Roberta McGlashan was previously sitting in as the alternate, so this would be up for discussion to find a replacement for that.
I'm interested, but I understand there's others that are interested also.
Yeah.
I will express I have an interest in.
I'm very interested in continuing serving as the chair of the First Five Commission.
And I think, as I stated when we reappointed Roberta to finish her term, that I'm very interested in serving as the alternate.
Okay, so we have two members that are interested.
I didn't hear what you said.
That's fine.
Okay.
You have seniority, so.
We're all equals up here, so. All right, so then, as suggested, then first by Mr. Cerna, and then alternate would be Supervisor Kennedy, and again with deference shown by Supervisor Frost on that one. So, all right.
And just for the record, the term expires for these two seats July 30th of 2018. Okay, so next we have the Freeport Regional Water Authority. Do you want to point out that Roberta McGlashan was the previous alternate on this board?
Okay.
So the board would need to discuss who will be the replacement.
Would you be interested, Ms. Frost or Ms. Peters, in an alternate?
I don't even know where it is. Isn't that
I don't
Patrick's
have a-
district?
It's the, yeah.
It's not in.
How about you?
District 2 and 5 are really the...
It seems like it's more appropriate for someone in maybe.
Well, we do.
in a
Most of
But
us
we need an
serve. We have
alternate.
2 seats.
Oh, you're already
East Bay Mud
serving.
has 2 seats. We have 2 seats, and the city has a ex officio seat. But
If you need me to be an alternate, I will.
Okay.
I don't have a penchant
Well, it's
for
a good way to learn about it, and you don't get called in.
Okay.
Again, we've been pretty good about attendance on that one as well. But I
Okay.
think it is important. Sometimes there's a requirement for a meeting that gets called pretty quickly. That hasn't happened recently, but, okay, so you would be, Sue would be willing to be
I
alternate?
can.
Okay, great.
Okay, so Supervisor Frost
And
is
if somebody
the
can give,
alternate.
again, and if she wants a briefing about just the background on that, certainly we as supervisors can communicate, but I think it might be important for somebody from staff to give
Absolutely.
Supervisor Frost, if she desires to have a
Yep.
briefing on
We'll take
these
care of
bodies.
that.
Okay, thanks.
I do.
Okay, good.
Okay, we'll take care of that, Supervisor. Next, you have the Human Services Coordinating Council. I do want to point out to the board respectively that you do not have any representation on this board and have not, I believe, since 2011.
So, but yeah, well, I guess it's okay, but I mean, again, if there's connectivity, I mean, if it's something that
We will bring it to you. Our staff does, DHA, DHHS staffs this commission, and report comes in the county exec, and if there's something we need, we do report back to you.
Okay. All right. Okay, next.
Next, we have the Law Library Board of Trustees. Currently, Robin is sitting in that position, but her term expired, so we need to make a decision to reappoint.
I think we should reappoint Robin.
Okay.
Agreed.
Congratulations.
Next.
All right.
Okay. Next, we do have the National Association of Counties. There's no action required here.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought we took this up at the same time we took up
We did.
CSAC.
And then for the no action on the next item, which is the Northern California World Trade Center Board, we took care of that as well. Then we have the no action on Powerhouse Science Center. It was previously known as the Discovery Museum Science and Space Center. And Mr. Kennedy, you are sitting on that, and you do not have an alternate. I just want to point that out to you. But no action is required. We also have the Regional Airport Planning Committee. No action is required on that as well.
What is that? I'm serious. What is that?
I will double check, but I believe that was put in place a couple decades ago to deal with some airport, I think, flight issues.
I think it's a
particularly
once every 2 years type of convening.
They still
particularly up in north by the
They actually
Matomas.
convene? They actually still convene?
I think they've convened once since I've been on the board. So
Yeah, I
that's
think
6
once,
years.
yeah. It's one of those things that we need to look at if we need to continue having it.
Okay, all right.
Okay. Next, we have the Regional Human Rights Fair Housing Commission Governing Board. The seats have expired for all of the appointed members, which would be Supervisor Kennedy. I want to note that Roberta McGlashan was previously sitting as the alternate, and that seat also has expired. And then Supervisor Natoli, you're sitting on as a member, and that seat has expired.
It's a heavy lift.
It meets once a year. Do you want to take her spot?
I can, yes. I'm
Yes?
happy to. Roberta's?
Yeah,
Yeah,
as an alternate, okay.
yes.
Okay.
It's once a year?
Yeah, well, that's what they told us, but that hasn't always played out. That we've had,
Maybe twice.
yeah, we've had a couple of meetings, and there's some.
But they're literally like 15 minutes.
Yeah, some fiduciary responsibilities as a close.
Winding it up.
Yeah.
It's
And,
just dealing with the pensions.
yep. There's been a couple other issues too, but. I mean,
Next.
yeah. Okay.
Next, we have the Regional Water Authority. We do not have any action to take there. River City Regional Stadium Financing Authority, no action required. Greater Sacramento Economic Councils, formerly the Sacramento Area Commerce and Trade Organization. I do want to point out that Roberta McGlashan was previously sitting as the alternate.
Yeah, I'm interested.
The executive is who goes to that, and Roberta was my alternate, so.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
can be an
and,
alternate.
as vice chair, I was hoping I would be the alternate.
Oh,
this
that's
year.
fine.
That's good.
Fine.
Okay, so Susan, you would like to be the alternate? I'll do that.
Yep.
Okay, so we have Supervisor Peters as the alternate.
Could I just take you back, though, to River City Regional Stadium Financing Authority? Again, another one
Okay.
that would, I do recall the genesis of this one, but, you know, since that time, we've had a new arena, and we've had the Rivercat Stadium's been built and so forth. Does the body still,
Yeah, we meet, twice a year?
Yeah, twice a year.
and talk about,
Go
In
over
fact,
finances.
I'm the illustrious chair right now, so.
oh, you are, okay.
There's still some financing issues that we bring, and
Okay.
we staff it out of the county exec, the county debt officer is the staff for it.
Okay, all right.
Those are good vehicles to maintain.
They're probably the shortest meetings you'll ever see.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So then, but on the GSAC, then we have
Takes longer to
Supervisor Peters would be the alternate, and Navgil would be the public sector member. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay. Next, we have Sacramento Area Council of Governments. I do want to point out that Supervisor Peters' term has expired.
I'd like to stay on the board.
Okay.
These are 4-year terms. Next, we have the Sacramento Area Flood Control Agency. I do want to point out that Supervisor Frost, the previous alternate was Ted Walter, and then Mr. Natoli, you do not have a designated alternate.
Right. And is this the appropriate time? We've had some of these that had indefinite terms in them. Is this one of those that, and I think they need to run concurrent with the supervisors who have a designee. You know, they have other stipulations. There may be an elected official, whatever. There are several of these in this chart.
Correct.
And I mean, our planning commission appointments run that way, and unless an enabling ordinance required something else that would go
Some of them
succeed.
do, like civil service, I believe that has a 5 to 6 year term,
Okay.
which extends beyond the supervisor. We could look at these, because we went through that exercise a couple of years ago, and that's what we found.
But where you have a designee, I mean, again, you know, and whether it's Supervisor Frost or one of us, that if you have a new supervisor coming in, that designee is serving, you know, at the designation, obviously with a confirmation by this board or affirmation by this board, but it doesn't make sense to me that unless the supervisor that is in that seat concurs that that's who they wish to have serve as their designee. You know, and indefinite, that just leaves it out there. There's no term at all.
Absolutely. Let us look at that, because that question we looked at,
Okay.
and that's one component we struggle with, is that what happens then, because they go beyond supervisor's appointment.
Well, what's indefinite? If you're appointed indefinitely, and so you have to remove somebody then by an action, actually removal versus it expiring at some set term, even if it wasn't concurrent with the supervisor's term.
Correct. That's the
Okay.
piece that we never, when we
needs to
did
be
the whole
addressed.
study, we kind of got right up to that line and we stopped. So we need to pick that up and relook at that. I'll
So-
work with Flo on it.
Okay.
So I cannot nominate Matt Hedges as my alternate, or
You can.
Yeah.
Yes, you can.
Yeah, we
I
can,
can.
we can replace. Yes, you
Yeah.
can. Yeah.
I'd like to.
Okay.
I'm-
All right.
Okay. So Matt Hedges is the alternate for Supervisor Frost. Moving on to Sacramento Area Sewer District, no action required there. Sue Frost is sitting in that by virtue of her seat. Sacramento Central Groundwater Authority, we do not need to take any action on that. Sacramento County Disaster Commission, we do not need to take any action. Next, and we are on our last page. We are with the Sacramento County Mental Health Board. The terms have expired for Supervisor Kennedy and Mr. Natoli as the alternate.
I'd like to nominate that Patrick continue in his capacity as our representative on the Mental Health Board.
I'm interested if no one else is, but
If you're again, I've served as all, but again, I think that if you're interested, Sue, that would be fine. There are, you know, Patrick's very good, and any one of us taking it on has been very good. I know that Supervisor Stern and I shared that at one time prior to Patrick's election to the board. It's a once a month, you know.
Once a month. The one thing that I remember 2 years ago when we had this discussion, it does overlap with LAFCO.
It does.
That was the one conflict.
oh, that's okay. Well, I don't know what
You're interested in LAFCO?
yes.
Okay,
I
well,
can.
if you-
I mean, I can do
You know,
whatever you guys, feel you want
okay.
me to do.
Well,
but-
again, we can hold that for a while. Again, I'm willing to, serve as an alternate, but I think if Sue would like that, and depending on the LAFCO comes in, it does overlap, because I mean, at the same time, there LAFCO's in here, the mental health board's out in one of the hearing rooms most of the time, so if LAFCO is your preference, okay.
So just so that I'm clear, Supervisor Kennedy is going to remain,
Right.
and Supervisor Natoli is the alternate?
I
Yeah,
think
unless
so.
somebody-
Yeah.
Okay. Next is the Sacramento County Public Facilities Financing Corporation. We do not need to take any action. We also have the Sacramento County Water Agency. Sue Frost is in that seat as well. Sacramento Employment and Training Agency, we do not need to take any action. Sacramento Groundwater Authority, I'd like to point out that Roberta McGlashan was the previous alternate.
Who's the member?
I'm,
Daryl Eck,
Oh, okay.
staff. You interested in this, Sue? It's a lot of the north area. I mean, it covers some
Yeah,
of
I
the area.
can-
Both you and Supervisor Peters have areas.
I'm interested.
Okay.
Okay, so Supervisor Frost is the alternate. Next, we have the Sacramento Local Agency Formation Commission. I do want to point out that Roberta McGlashan was sitting in it previously as the alternate, and that term has also expired. Supervisor Peters, your term has expired as well.
Okay, Sue, you're interested in Supervisor
Yes.
Frost? Susan, are you?
I'm thinking about it.
She's paused.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
So, I'm sorry.
So it'd be
What-
Peters and Frost, along with,
Cerna, Peters, and Frost.
that's right. Yeah.
So I am an alternate? or-
Alternate.
Yeah, so Supervisor Frost is the alternate, Peters is a member, and Supervisor Cerna, you're a member, but your term doesn't expire until 2018. Next, we have the Sacramento Metropolitan Air Quality Management District Board of Directors. We do not have any action to take there. Supervisor Frost was placed in that seat. For District 4, Sacramento Metropolitan Cable Television Commission. So Supervisor Frost, you have a vacancy for your alternate, as well as Supervisor Natoli.
I'd like to nominate Matt Hedges.
Okay. Mr. Natoli, just leave it as is? Okay. Next, we have Sacramento-Placerville Transportation Corridor, the JPA. I do want to point out, it's not reflected on your spreadsheet, and I apologize, but I do want to point out that Roberta McGlashan was sitting as the alternate for the JPA.
Yes, she was.
Is this a southeast connector?
This
No.
is the,
No, this is the
Sacramento
rail
Plaza.
corridor. This is
Oh,
the-
rail corridor,
Right.
okay.
And they meet quarterly, and if, again, I would be happy to serve as alternate if you wanted, when it started out, it was nearly entirely 5th District, but with the redistricting in 4th District, the portion that is in an unincorporated area actually lies within.
But the majority is in your district?
Well, if you took the corridor coming out from, downtown, maybe
I can
shared.
be an alternate.
Okay, that's fine. Okay.
okay. We are almost done. Sacramento Public Library Authority Governing Board. Supervisor Frost, you may want to look at your alternate.
I need to request a little, well, I have an alternate, but their term is not up, right? Or do I need to select an alternate?
It's
Or-
just something that you may want to consider
Has to be an elected official.
replacing.
My chief of staff is working on that now, so I need a little more time, I guess, to
Absolutely.
maybe we can continue it.
Okay, not a problem. Supervisor Natoli, you do not have an alternate, and are we leaving that way? Okay. Last two is the Sacramento Regional Arts Facilities Financing Authority. There's no action needed there. And then finally...
I just have one comment. I think that doesn't exist anymore, so we need to look into that.
Okay, I'll make a note.
I think that the city, I mean, I've just happened to be going through an agenda recently on the city council, and they abolished it without saying anything, I
Oh,
believe.
good. Can we wrap it up? Whatever we need to do to finalize our...
We'll bring it to you on the 24th.
I went to some meetings, so many meetings that I was the only one there before you joined the board.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just inactive.
Okay, I've notated that. And then finally, we have the Sacramento Regional County Sanitation District. We do not have any action to take.
I got
and
another
No, there's another.
Not finally, there's another page.
It's a whole other page. I was saying we all.
I got a little happy.
This feels like an eternity.
You had the abbreviated version, I guess. So.
No, I
Okay.
got a little happy. So Sacramento Regional County Sanitation District, I do want to point out that Supervisor Frost is sitting in for District 4. No action is needed. And then next, we have Sacramento Regional Solid Waste Authority. We do not have any action to take here, but I want to point out that Supervisor Frost is sitting in that seat for District 4. And then for Sacramento Regional Transit District, Supervisor Roberta McGlashan was sitting in as a member, and also the term has expired.
I'm interested if no one else is.
Actually, I would be very interested in this just because of the impact it has on District 2.
And as
It's the heaviest ridden light rail line in the county and other things.
And as Supervisor Natoli, who also serves on RT with me, can attest, we've had over the last few years a number of route extension and other logistic issues as it relates to parts of District 2, and I suspect that that's going to continue. Having talked with Patrick about his interest in transit generally since his election to this board, I would like to nominate Patrick Kennedy to
The
RT.
comment I have about that is that leaves it all three seats primarily city-focused, and the RT does run in the unincorporated area north in my district and Sue's district, and so that leaves no representation from that area. I just would urge you to consider that.
I see no district boundaries. With the
Oh,
things
yes,
that
I know,
do.
Supervisor Kennedy.
Okay, well, we have a nomination. Again, is there, again, we can take it up this afternoon, or if Supervisor Frost and Kennedy want to at least talk about it, I think we have a nomination. We can vote. I mean, you expressed an interest. I think obviously Susan makes a point. I do think that.
I think Susan makes a good point.
Okay, well, maybe I should suggest that, again, it may not solve the issue. We had a motion to have a second yet, but that maybe we could at least allow the two board members to have a conversation, not the rest of us, and we can come back on that unless people
I
want to
don't
vote.
mind having a conversation about it here either.
Yeah.
I mean, I do feel strongly about it as one of the few elected officials in the region that actually uses it as a commuting mechanism and on a regular basis. It is something that is pretty important to me.
Yeah. I'd say that, one piece of it, and again, it doesn't take away from the conversation here, but that both Citrus Heights and Folsom have representation on the RT board, and there are voting members that are on the board. It doesn't take in the unincorporated area, to the point that Susan made, but it does cover the at least those incorporated cities. They have representation along with Rancho Cordova and Elk Grove. And of course, the city of Sacramento are all represented there as well. So there is some representation for the northeastern portion, but it doesn't take in the vast unincorporated area. And okay, well, we have a nomination. Do we want to talk about it some more? Again, maybe we can vote it.
Just vote it up or down.
Okay, so we have a motion. We have a second.
Second.
All right, so the motion is to fill the expired term of Supervisor McGlashan, appointing for our own ranks as Supervisor Kennedy. Any other comments? Please vote.
No offense intended, Patrick. No offense intended.
Oh, of course not.
Sorry, Patrick.
And the motion passed.
Go for it.
None taken.
We know you'll do a good job.
Not always 5-0 around here, so. Okay, very good. Okay, then let's, with that having been said, let's move to the next one.
Okay, so our next one is the Sacramento Transportation Authority, and I do want to point out that Supervisor Peters, her term expires, and also Supervisor Frost. The previous person was Roberta McGlashan, the term expires, so we need to reappoint.
I have a question about that. All 5 members of the board are automatic members. Why do we have terms?
Yeah.
Shouldn't they be concurrent?
Question.
I mean, so if I went
be an
off, then
annual
Kennedy
thing.
would have 2 votes?
Right.
Is that's something you guys got to solve,
Okay.
Okay.
In their bylaws or something.
in my view.
Did you mention, Flo, that there are 4 members that could have alternates? Do you want to offer that?
Yeah, just one second. And also, for your members who do not have alternates, you can enlist an alternate, but they do need to be an elected official.
So then Sue is the one who has to consider that. for
Yes,
sometime in the
and I
future.
need to request a continuance on that.
Okay.
Yeah, you serve in that stead until you have someone you want to bring forward.
The prior alternate would have been great, but it has to be an elected, right?
Right.
Teresa Stanley.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, we'll come back with that later on.
Okay. And next, we do not need to take any action, but it's the Sacramento Valley Basin-Wide Air Pollution Control Council. Next, we have the Sacramento San Joaquin Delta Conservancy, and we do not need to take any action on that. Then we have the San Joaquin Valley Rail Committee. No action required on that.
Well, let me tell you, though, that Member Davis, who was the elected official, if that's a designated seat, is, he stepped down as mayor. And I don't know if that calls for an elected official that has to be appointed there, but if it does, then that is vacant, because Gary is no longer.
Yeah, one member does need to be an elected official, so we'll follow up on that
Okay.
item and bring that back at the next meeting. Just make a note really quick here. Thank you, Mr. Natoli. Next, we have the Discovery Museum Science and Space Center. We don't need to take any action, but Mr. Kennedy, you don't have an alternate. Do you want to leave it that way? Okay. And then next, we have the Tobacco Securitization Authority of Northern California. No action is required on that.
Wait, why?
The seats are indefinite. So unless you want to make a change,
I would be happy for someone else to learn the details of the Tobacco Securitization Authority of Northern California and that of Southern California.
Well,
I've been on it for 12 years.
We're
so
all non-smokers, so.
And you've done a wonderful
At your
job as
mer-
chair.
I just have one. You're looking at me.
I got snagged into it when I was first on the board.
Did you hear this morning? She was talking about that in her talk there.
I recalled that 2 years ago being put on this was part of the hazing process.
Okay, I'm feeling the haze.
It's not that bad. It's one meeting in October. It only goes 5 minutes.
I just have to ask one question. Does it matter if I have investments in tobacco? Does that create a problem for my ability to vote?
I don't
on
think
that
so.
one?
It's about a bonding authority, isn't it?
We could look into that question. We haven't been posed that question
I don't know
before.
what their geographic coverage is, and I don't know what, I just am asking.
Okay. Good question.
okay. So I have a note for that one.
We're going to continue that. Okay.
Yep, to the 24th. The next one was for Southern California, so we'll hold both of those. And then we have the corporation, and I just want to point out that Sue Frost is on that for District 4, and that, again, you do have a vacant seat there, and I believe the last time we had that seat filled was in 2012.
We're going to do an outreach effort again,
Yeah.
see if we can get a CPA, and there's been very limited interest, but we're going to push this year again, see if we can get somebody.
Okay.
We're trying to talk Sue Frost to be on the other committee, and we can't find somebody from the private sector to serve on it. Anyway, okay. So let's see what we can do on that. And if we need to do a letter from the board chair to some interested parties to ask them if they'd be willing to serve that capacity, I'm sure they're willing to assist in that regard. So, all right. Anything else on that?
That concludes your own ranks appointments.
Okay, so we have a couple to come back to, and thank everybody for their willingness to serve and for the participation in the discussion here this afternoon. So, all right, that takes us then. I know we've got some off agendas, and we have I think a brief update on our water situation in the county. And so with that, let's take that first, as I know we have people waiting. So let's under your comments, and maybe we can come back to the other ones, but let's get a report on that.
What I've asked Steve Cantami, who's our chief of OES, is to give a very brief update on the situation with the storm, what kind of flooding that he has seen, and also with caveat that as the rain's coming, southern part of the county, we do have some issues that we're encountering. So with that, Steve, can you give, and he was in the field today, so we yanked him out to bring him here.
He doesn't have his boots on.
I did. This is the best I could do in the office. So yeah, I do apologize for the attire. I was in the field a lot today and day yesterday. So good afternoon, board chair and board members. Steve Cantelmi from Sacramento County Office of Emergency Services. Our EOC has been activated for the last 3 days to different degrees. We've had as many as a 3-person EOC and or as few as a 3-person and as many as 15 there. We're going to continue to be open throughout this next storm event. There's a lot of things going on. We're monitoring a lot of the issues that are happening here in the county. But the first thing I want to talk about is there is a issue going on with the levee in Sacramento. The Sacramento River has a little bit of a slough over by Front Street, and city's requested some resources from state DWR, and they're there working on that problem. It doesn't look to be too serious at this point, but that's just kind of the update I got early this morning. There's some more updates coming. My staff has been involved in some of the conference calls that happened today at 10 and 11. I just don't have the information from that yet.
Would that be, would that be kind of a riprap repair in your estimation?
They attempt to do like an envelope repair first. It's kind of a complicated thing, and I don't quite understand it myself, but it uses visqueen and they fold it over itself and stuff, and they weren't real happy with that result, but that was about 1:30 this morning, and so they're looking to do something different right now, and I just don't know what that is. Okay. So that's the Sacramento River. The consumed that's the one that we're focused on mostly right now. We've had some overlapping down there, and we've also had a couple boils. I have a map here if the board would care to see them with some pictures of the boil.
Can you put it up on, when
I haven't used this thing, so hopefully this is the map of the boil, actually, and it's at Wilton Road near Dillard, just north of Dillard. There's 2 boils. They're approximately 100 feet apart, and RD 800 is the one that's responsible out there, and they have been working on that for the last almost 24 hours. They have brought in some rock and some gravel and some sand. They've now requested some assistance from state DWR, and we have forwarded that request up, and state DWR is going to come out there. I believe county has also provided some sand, and I'm not sure if anything else, but just sand. But anyway, they're assisting with that effort as well. There's some crews out there doing some sandbag work around those boils, and we do have some pictures of those too if you want to see those. And then the other issue is the overtime.
I'd like to see some pictures of it. And we just got an alert that the National Weather Service has told Wilton to evacuate. Is that?
So we have a voluntary evacuation place, but let me put these up for you real quick.
So the Weather Service makes that call, though? Who makes the call on evacuation?
They didn't make that call. We made that call.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Oh, well, they're reporting it as NWS.
Okay. So that's one of the views of the boils. I also have another one that just shows you where they are.
Steve, before you're going quicker, that's fine. But this is on the south side, like roughly directional, kind of get that east, west, north, south. But if you were traveling down Wilton Road from Grant Line Road, this would be on this, on the far side of the Cosumnes.
On the San Joaquin side, San Joaquin County side?
No, not that far south.
Just checking.
And this is probably you're probably 100 yards, 150, maybe 200 yards in from the road, this boil. And
is that Wilton Road in the background?
Yes, it is Wilton Road, where you see the cars parked there. Yeah.
This might help.
Yep. And
if you can see the boil ring down here highlighted in yellow, and then there's another one about 100 yards or 100 feet from that, approximately. And they have crews working on both of them right now. So again, they gave us an update, but I just wasn't privy to it because I was doing other things and my staff hasn't.
And Steve, I would just say this is an area that we assisted in 97, 98, and it held there. Where it didn't hold upstream, and so I guess the concern that again, not knowing what you know in the field or anybody else, but that we've got another crest coming on the consumers, and I don't know how that compares. Maybe you're going to touch on that versus what we
That
had.
is one of the concerns. They feel they have a good handle on it, or getting a good handle on it, but if we again get another overtopping somewhere that affects that boil, then they don't know what's going to happen.
Where's it overtopping at?
It's south of that, so it's close. It's not threatening that now.
Yeah.
There's two places where we know that it's overtopping, and it's down by one of them's Dillard Road between the water's coming across between Riley and Christensen, and the other one is it's Twin Cities between Bruceville and I believe it's Riley Street.
No, that'd be Pellandini.
Pardon me?
That would be Pellandini Road on Twin Cities, and Riley would be on Dillard, as you said a moment ago.
You're right.
Road
99 in Riley is the one road closure because of the water coming across. The other is Bruceville and Christensen's off of Twin Cities.
Yes.
Yeah, there we go. So there is a flood fight going on at the boils. Other than that, there's not really a whole lot we can do about the water that's overtopping. The water is expected to rise today around, I believe they're expecting it to reach its crest around 2 to 4 o'clock in the morning. And so we're going to just keep on monitoring and see what happens. There's concern on that whole levee because it's not very well maintained, but RDA 800 has that area in there and are responsible for that.
Let me ask you just again, real quickly though. So you said that you requested help from state DWR. I think again we responded with sand. The sheriff's crews were out there. Again, I commend our folks for their assistance. But knowing that we've still got a little bit of time before the next wave hits us and comes through, is there anything else? Again, I don't know how quickly the state goes into action. I assume that they're on when they're on emergency call that they respond. Is there more that we can do or offer beyond, again, and I know there's reclaiming of costs and all that, but when we're in a flood fight, people want to pick up the pieces afterwards, but if you can avoid worrying too much about all those jurisdictional aspects with and not getting each other's way. I guess I would just say that, again, I think our county water resources have been very helpful, but these are, again, unincorporated area communities. You have a reclamation district that did work after 97, 98, and I guess, Steve, I would just say that for you and anybody else, if there's need to have board direction, that again certainly within reason, I think we need to be able to not only be on alert, but technical advice, or if there's other things we can provide relative to supplies or materials, because we did that in 97, 98. There was some rock that was ordered in, and it it held, but we didn't have these two kind of crests coming through, and now we get the second one that's going. I just saw the announcement Susan was referring to that came through just a few minutes ago. I guess can you assure me that we at the local level, again, you can, sometimes lose something in that translation or with time, and time begins to work against us in some of these situations if there's too much delay. So again, what assurance can you give me that
what I can tell you is the state DWR has their experts there, and any requests that they're making from the county, we would be happy to fill them if we can.
Okay.
At this point in time, they have not asked us for anything other than the initial sand. And I know there's rock being delivered. The state, first of all, the RD has ordered a lot of the assets there, and now the state is also looking into it. And so if they need any more, they would either ask it from us or others.
Okay, let me just point out one other thing. I know Supervisor Frost wants to weigh in here, but as you get further downstream, though, you don't have organized reclamation districts in some of those areas. They're private levees,
right.
But if they go, you can say, well, that was a landowner responsibility or whatever. But the impacts can be far greater than just that landowner or property owner. Again, we don't have the resources to flood fight the entirety, and nor do we have the responsibility or even access in some of those areas. But I guess lessons learned from 86 and 97, that when it begins to go overland, it can do a lot of property damage. Obviously, it can put people's lives in peril. I think we've gotten pretty good about alerting folks to that. So the area that assuming that we're able to dodge this, just west of the bridge. What happens, though, as it gets, 5 miles downstream, you got Caltrans that will protect the highway and so forth and so on. And then I do worry, and maybe you're going to touch on it, what happens when this water gets, however it gets west of 99 onto I-5. You're all still in Sacramento County. It's still Sacramento County residents. And it takes a while before it gets all the way to San Joaquin County, and it can do a lot of devastation between here and there.
That is part of the unknown, though, because we don't know how much water and how much overlapping there's going to be. But we do know that there's a lot of capacity out there in those farmlands to take a lot of that excess water. But because we don't know how much is coming out, we don't even know what the flow is now. And we know that it's flooding at somewhere around 12 feet, maybe a little bit less. And we know that this is going to crest at 14 feet. So it's going to get a lot more water down there. But unfortunately, there's nothing we can do about the overtopping now. There's no way to prevent it that I'm aware of. I've talked to State DWR, and they're saying the same thing. They can't get on the levees to do anything with them, and so there's really not much they can do except to work on the boils. And
let me just ask you one other question, and I don't want to keep interrupting you, but relative to livestock, again, that's not, necessarily our responsibility, but, certainly the wild critters, they're fending for themselves. But for, whether it's cows or cattle or horses in some cases, people, can move some of that and they will move to higher ground on their own. But in the past, we've had that where we've had stranded, livestock that they get to high ground where they can, but then they're stuck there for days at a time. Have we got provisions in place for?
Well, we do know that a lot of the people have been moving their animals out. It's the ranchers that have the larger amounts of livestock. Yeah. They're still out there. There's a lot of them still out there, but I saw trucks running out there yesterday, removing a lot of the cattle. Okay. I don't know whether or not they're going to have them all out and by then, but we have talked to animal
because
control.
The dairies, they got to keep milking. That's the thing. They can't, they stay in place. I mean,
right.
They make provisions, but all right. I know that we have the right folks in place to help with this, but Supervisor Frost, I'm sorry.
No, I withdraw my question. I got the answer. Thank you.
So just a few more details. We still have an evacuation order out there. It's a voluntary evacuation. We're going to be reinforcing that again today with another announcement using Sacramento Alert. The Sacramento Sheriff's Department's out there going around the streets, and they're not going house to house, but they're going down the streets. They have the helicopter going along the river, making announcements. The shelter has been open and closed depending on the needs. So far, nobody's taken advantage of the shelter. We're looking to relocate it to a better location, just to closer to the population, but it will be open again tonight. So at this point, there's been no animals or people taking advantage of the shelter. And then we still have some concerns on the McCullamy, because the McCullamy is going to be affected by this too. We don't know, again, what the extent will be. We're just hoping we don't have any more boils or any more sloughing or overtopping. But we have everybody are part of our conference call, so everybody's aware, everybody is staffed up, and everybody is trying to get their resources in place for a quick response. That's all I can say. Okay. Any questions about that? Okay. Mike may have some more.
Good. Thanks, Steve.
Mm-hmm.
Michael Peterson, Water Resources. I just wanted to add to what Steve's comments were. We have some technical staff on site at the Wilton Road location to coordinate with RD 800 and to convey any requests in terms of materials or guidance that they may need. In addition, we have some folks on the ground at Lambert Road who are roving in that area as well, just monitoring the elevations, making sure that the gates there are holding water back from the south, and staff upstairs right now is trying to develop sort of an ad hoc tool using the state's projections on the consumers just to sort of truth what may happen down at the lower end of the watershed. By comparison, and it's not necessarily a source of comfort, but by comparison to 1986 or 97, what we're seeing now is a fair bit lower in terms of the flow and the stages. However, again, RD 800, they do a great effort, but the levees there are not to a condition that you would desire ultimately for protection. So it's difficult to determine where there might be an area of failure or boil. But again, we have folks out there staying in contact with RD 800. We are moving additional sand and bags out to the Wilton Fire Station. Good. I know the Cosumnes fire chief is sort of coordinating that effort on behalf of Wilton and with RD 800 to make sure that they've got the materials they need. So we were going to roll out more sand just about 2 hours ago.
One question then relative to supply of materials. Do they need emergency generators? Do they need lights? I mean, RDs would necessarily have those types of things where we have those available for, both urban as well as, I guess, rural deployment. Again, I don't know if there's been any requests made and so forth, but if you're going to be doing levee watch, and because, this alert, the evacuation order says between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. tomorrow morning is the time they see as being very critical, and at least in that location. I trust that we would make those available because we have some of those.
To the degree that either Water Resources or Department of Transportation or General Services fleet has that equipment, they make those requests through OES, through the County Office of Emergency Services, and then either one of the county units can provide it or it's forwarded to the state. Such requests have not yet come to us, and again, we are on the location with them, just to ensure that if they do have any specific requests, that we get those right away.
Will we remain on location 24/7 for the next couple of days?
We're going to be down there at least for the duration of this afternoon into the evening.
Okay.
I don't know that we're going to be out there overnight, but we'll touch base with our D800 engineer and see what they're proposing.
Okay. All right.
Mr. Chairman, just very quickly, I wanted Steve to give the website, if folks are watching at home, where can they log on to get information that Steve's providing? So, Steve.
Yeah, if the board would like, they can go to sacready.com and they can see what's posted there. We try to keep it updated, but a lot of times we get really busy inside the EOC, and so there's sometimes a little bit of a delay getting it in there, but that's where you can watch most of the activity.
What is it?
sacready.org.
Is it
sacready.org.
SacramentoReady.org.
Yes.
Oh.
Either one will work.
Which is it?
Either one.
If you Google either one will work.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. Okay. Be sure. All right. Anything else?
That's it, sir.
All right. Thanks. Okay. Before we get to board member comments, I know we have some adjournments. We do have some folks who've signed up to speak, and a couple have waited quite a bit of time this morning. We have Robert Bendorf, followed by Martha Esch, followed by Phil Rios. And so, Mr. Bendorf, you've been here all morning, so invite you back up. I know you've been here before. And
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Now, board members, thank you for having me. I actually have, I guess I'm here for a couple reasons. One, to congratulate Supervisor Peters, Supervisor Frost on their successful campaigns, as well as provide a little bit of update while I was here on the HERO program. Again, my name is Robert Bendorf. I'm the Market Development Manager for the Sacramento as well as Central Valley region of California. And so I actually have handouts. I don't know if they made it their way to you yet, but this is kind of an example of the overview of the county. This was specific to District 1. This is kind of a long document that actually, I guess you could, if you like this drill down, you can thank Supervisor Cerna. We spoke about this actually a few months ago at NACO in regards to district-specific information. Today, actually, via the HeroGov platform, you could actually pull this up and see the improvements that have been done. A lot of the benefits to these homeowners have been really immense in the way of playing that middle person between contractor and homeowner, making sure that a homeowner is installing the most energy efficient product, as well as giving contractors a solution to increase local economic growth, creating jobs and such. So just wanted to provide that to you. Definitely don't need to overwhelm you with too much information, but if you have any questions, please feel free. I put my information on the speaker card. So if I haven't had an opportunity to chat with you in depth yet, please feel free to reach out, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Well, thank you for being patient and sticking around. This is very, very helpful. I like the way you've presented the information, especially with regards to the economic activity that's associated with the good work that HERO's doing here, especially the jobs created. That's going to catch everyone's attention. So, job well done. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
There's different colored dots on the map. But I don't see.
Yeah, so you actually, you are, I guess it's you as well as Supervisor Peters actually are beneficial in that you're able to zoom in on those dots. You actually have access to this if you would like. So where if this is obviously just a picture, but on the HeroGov platform, it's just herogov.com, you can actually zoom in and click on those dots specifically. So you see the green dots, those are energy efficiency improvements, yellow or orange being solar, and then blue being water efficiency. So on the program itself, you could actually zoom in and click and see what exactly that homeowner did to upgrade their home.
Thank you. That's impressive.
Yeah, I think some people actually have just blue dots because it wasn't able to zoom in tight enough.
Okay, well, thank you, Robert, for, again, your work in this area and for the good summation, and again, for your patience and for being here to congratulate our colleagues on their re-election. And anyway, any other questions then on this? If not, be safe out there.
Yeah.
Okay, good, thanks. All right, next we have Martha Esch. Martha?
She was just here, wasn't she?
She was just here a moment ago, yeah. Okay, we'll go to Phil Rios. And Phil, we'll come back to Martha in a moment if she's still here. Good afternoon. Thank you for your patience too, Phil.
Good afternoon, Sacramento.
Oh, other way. Just put it face up.
Yeah.
There you go.
Stephanie said heads up. I was an MP. I don't follow instructions too well.
Okay, good.
Happy New Year to all. And
same to you, Phil.
This is a rough draft. I'll add to it. The VAC, it was established in 1921. I'm the 69th commander, and there are 29 veteran and community organizations under our banner, and we meet once a month since 1921. I represent 4,000 veterans and veterans' families in the local area. We coordinate with similar organizations, Yolo, El Dorado, Jackson, Placer County, who do similar activities. And I, as a citizen and as a combat veteran and as a voter, plus we as all veterans, we wish to congratulate the Sacramento County Supervisor Sue Frost. I do it personally. And Doc, Don, Julie. Want to thank you for a surprise visit to our meeting last Thursday and to discuss the events and the results of the tragic death due to weather conditions of a homeless veteran in that area. As an after-action report, Rackham Funeral Home will provide free funeral process for the veteran. And our organization, we provide honor guard for all families in this area since 1921. We'll provide full military honors for this veteran. We're going to have a chaplain receive the flag. He has no family. It's a sad incident, and I just want to thank you for your attendance. Supervisor Natoli has also attended over the past years to our VAC meeting, but we could feel your sincerity. That's why I'm here today. The rain, and you came to us, and we're going to come to you and just thank you. You know, that was really sincere. On a positive note, I also want to recognize and give kudos to Supervisor Don Natoli for your consistent ongoing efforts. Happy New Year to all you gentlemen and women, and success in your endeavors. There's a lot of work to do. I see you guys work behind the sidelines and behind the ground. Don Natoli has always been there in different activities. He always shows up there at parades, events, ceremonies, the rain, sleet, snow, Algrove. I always see him there. And then a successful endeavor was the Veterans Village. It's kind of a paradox because that has 150 units for accommodations to get homeless people off the street. And for those who don't know about Veterans Village, you can Google it. But Supervisor Cerna and Don were there at the opening ceremonies. There are veterans who are coming on board. I visited, and we provide Thanksgiving dinner and different dinners and try to get them into the structured social, instead of being homeless, and we also help them connect with work programs, resumes, training, social skills, get them back to the mainstream, and the transition to get them back in the workforce. I appreciate it. At one time, I was not so much homeless. I was employed, but I was just disoriented. And the PTSD, I had help from the VA, so.
No.
Other side, Phil. Yeah, turn it over.
Yeah, flip it up.
Yeah, turn the paper over. It's got to be face up.
Yeah.
There you go.
And forgetful. This is a shot of the VAC, the group shot. And this is the advice and input of Supervisor Frost. It's a more happier shot.
That's the crazy shot.
And I just want to inform the supervisors that our staff advocate is sending to your schedulers and your chief of staff, each one of you, a request for an appointment in office so we can discuss ongoing veterans issues throughout the year. And we appreciate all your efforts in military issues, veterans issues, and thank you.
Good.
Oh, when I got drafted, my hair was 3 times longer than that lady. I was going to City College. I was as tall as Don and just as thin. I had a sign that said, "Hell no, I won't go." And when I got drafted, I served my country regardless.
Yeah.
Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Thanks for your service.
Thank you, Phil.
And look forward again to meeting with you. And thanks again for advocacy, and to the Veterans Affiliate Council for all of their work on behalf of veterans in our community. So, okay, with that, then we have Martha. Third time's a charm. It seems I call you, but every time you stepped out of the
Sorry about that.
No problem. Okay, Martha.
Thank you all very much, and welcome to the board.
Thank you.
I am from Locke. Most of you know me. On items 35 and 36 of your agenda, I noticed that there was an omission of the representative for position for the Locke Management Association and the Locke Foundation boards. I came to you folks back July of 2012 to ask you if you were aware that that there were several vacancies on the board of Locke Management and Locke Foundation. At this time, there are less than half on the Locke Management Association of the designated 13 board members. The Locke Management Association and Locke Foundation are both public agencies that were created by the SHRA in conjunction with Sacramento County Board of Supervisors and Sacramento City Council, I believe. Or not Sacramento City?
No.
It's a joint powers.
Yeah, just the county and the housing agency. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Back in 2005, or 2004, September of 2004, I believe it was. It has, each board has 13 members, and they're set up, they're structured the same way. They have a representative seat designated for Sacramento County Board of Sacramento County representative, a state park seat, 3 representatives for Chinese associations, which I have questioned, whether that's appropriate or not, or even legal to have a designation for a specific national origin. And then it has a preservation seat, historic preservation seat, that 4 of the seats have to be ratified by you folks here each time they expire or change. And that's the 3 Chinese Association seats and the Office of Historic Preservation seat. Actually, also the State Park seat is supposed to be ratified by you, and then you're supposed to have a placement of your own representative. And then there are 6, there's an at-large seat, which can be basically anybody, and then 6 board seats. The last 6 board seats are the commercial and residential owner representatives of, but the bylaws state that owners cannot fill the seats, yet there are 6 designations for owner seats, so they conflict. There are other places that conflict within the bylaws and the CC&Rs, and there's an unconstitutional wording in the bylaws, not the CC&Rs. The CC&Rs were changed, but they were dictated by the bylaws. Anyway, I come before you today on items 35 and 36. I would like to volunteer, since I attend all of the meetings except for 2 in the last 6 years. I've attended all of the public meetings that they've held for Lock Management Association and most of the meetings for Lock Foundation. I would like to volunteer to be the intermediary or the representative for the county, if that is possible.
Okay. Well, thank you for that offer, Martha. And I just say again, obviously, you know, you did a pretty good summation there in a short amount of time. Certainly, County Council has been looking at this, as you're well aware, and you know there are some vacant seats, and we haven't filled the county seat for some time now, probably 2.5 years. I think it's been
since Pat Brazel retired.
And the other vacancies, there are some. I mean, the state backed away, you know, some time ago, and doesn't intend to. Made it clear. And I know June Palmays, working with Mr. Vaughn, has been looking at this. And I mentioned to Nav McGill when I understood you were going to be here today that we need to revisit this. Again, we have certainly some responsibility. There was some autonomy given to the bodies, public or not, under the authorities that were vested with both the foundation and with the management association. However, we still maintain the 5 seats as accurately described by you, Martha, some connectivity to those. And so, again, with the offer that she's made, I would maybe ask Nav that you and Robin, maybe again we can. And again, there's been some review of this in the past, and certainly Martha's been kept apprised, at least in part, about that. You know, I say in part because, again, it hasn't concluded with anything yet, but I appreciate your offer here today. So I don't think we're prepared to fill that seat yet, but I think obviously we recognize there's a vacancy and that the functionality of that group does depend upon hopefully a full membership or a fuller membership than what we have there now. So.
May I ask, or make one more point and ask a question?
Okay.
One point that I know I've made to you folks in the past couple, 3 years is that since December of 2009, that's 7 years ago, was the last time that the 31, now 31, it was 38 at that time, property owners in Locke received electoral ballots as per their bylaws for the 6 property owner seats. Since then, the current board of directors, which has dwindled down to 7 directors, 6 of whom are property owner seats, they have self-elected their board seats. So in our opinion, they really have no authority, and they have lawsuits against 4 of us now in the town to try to grab our properties. Okay. And there's no maintenance of our common ground areas around our homes.
Okay. Well, again, I know that it's certain for the time allotted here today, Martha. And again, I think you've been pretty clear about that. But
my other question was, can you put this item on your next agenda?
Probably not on the next agenda, but they can be agendized, and I think I want to give certainly an opportunity for council and the county exec's office to take a look at this. So let us.
Thank you.
We can keep you apprised of it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Martha. Okay. All right. That's concludes the speakers. I know we have some adjournments, but maybe we go to quickly exec comments and supervisor comments, and then we'll go to the adjournments. So, do you have anything?
Nothing more to add.
Okay. Supervisor comments beyond adjournments? Yeah, Mr. Cerna.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just real briefly, I know that along with all the activity that some of which we heard about from our OES director, along with dealing with the water, I know that a number of our staff and various agencies are also working very fast to ensure that homeless folks that are on the parkway or were on the parkway that have been affected by the high water are being offered motel vouchers. And as recently as this morning, during my drive-in and seeing what I saw along the Garden Highway near the I-5 interchange, which was what appeared to be a kind of growing linear tent city along the bike trail there, I've asked our executive, our county executive, to please deploy his appropriate personnel to make sure that if we do have some folks out there that feel that their only option is to be in those tents in this inclement weather, that they are offered an ability to actually seek shelter other than a tent. So I want to thank Nav Gill and his staff for acting fast on that. And again, we are doing everything we can. It's a no pun intended, a fluid situation, but there are a number of constituent transmittals that my office has received over the last few days about the condition of the parkway, both about the presence of homeless individuals, but also reporting what folks are seeing in terms of some of the environmental damage that's going on. So we are working very hard and taking this very seriously to address those concerns as they either come through my office or other channels here at the county.
Okay, thanks, Phil.
Supervisor, if I could just give a very quick update, is that we have made contact with folks, and
Great.
we have motel vouchers, other services, so we're working with them. Who wants to take the services, where can they go? So
Great.
I'm hoping for a positive outcome.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments before we get to the adjournments in just a moment? Patrick, anything? Okay. Susan, any? Yeah, well, yeah, we're going to have some adjournments, but any comments you wanted, any announcements, or any closing comments?
Okay.
You're welcome to.
Well, I just wanted to thank my colleagues for helping me along the way as I begin my new service at the county. I also wanted to briefly comment on the homeless and the storms. We've been working hard in Citrus Heights to try to find local solutions for the homeless problem. And during the winter, this year, we started our first winter shelter. And I wanted to especially thank the faith-based community and all those who have come together to help out with the winter shelter. And I was there. I've been working through my church, and we actually were able to find a place for one of our homeless people to stay, a roof over her head. But there were so many more, and I guess the response that I got was that it's like a 4-year waiting list. So it's hard because there's just not enough resources for people who would like to come in, and it breaks your heart when you're out there trying to help them. So I'm excited to do the work and looking forward to it, and thank all of you for your help as I begin. Thank you.
Thanks, Sue. I would just say, too, that this homeless thing, we're going to have plenty of opportunity over the next few weeks to talk about this and maybe some of the potential measures that can be taken in addition to what we're doing currently, and appreciate the comments by Supervisor Cerna and Frost. Okay. With that, then we'll come to the adjournments. I know Supervisor Peters and then Supervisor Cerna and I have one as well. So, Susan?
Okay, thank you. Unfortunately, because of the long break we had, I have several adjournments. First, I'd like to adjourn in memory of Ray Stone, Jr. Ray was the founder of Ray Stone Incorporated, a prominent real estate investment firm that owns and manages commercial, multifamily, and senior community properties in California, Texas, and New Mexico. Ray began his real estate career while serving in the Counterintelligence Corps in Germany by mailing home payments to purchase his first property in Fair Oaks, which he developed into the Almond Orchard Shopping Center. And in 1969, he founded the firm that bears his name. Today, his son Todd is a company president, and his son Michael is vice president of the firm's commercial division. He was also really active in the community and served as president of many organizations, including the Sutter Club, the Crocker Art Museum Foundation, both the California and Sacramento Associations and the Institute of Real Estate Management, Sacramento. He was involved in the Sacramento Metro Chamber, the California Real Estate Association, the California Housing Council, UC Berkeley Foundation, Rotary Club of Art and Arcade, and the Sacramento Board of Realtors. You can see he had quite a commitment to the Sacramento area, and he will be missed. My second adjournment is in memory of Sam Camillos. Like the song Bye Bye Miss American Pie, the music died for me and countless others with the passing of Sam Camillos, who had retired after serving as a very popular music teacher for many years at Foothill High School and the then Grant School District. Besides conducting the high school band and producing several high school musicals, Mr. Camillos, or as his students called him, Mr. K, because none of us could pronounce Camillos in junior high, played the trombone in the Camellia Symphony Orchestra, and served as president of the Music Educators National Conference, was chairman of the Golden Empire Music Association, and president of the Sacramento Community Concert Association, which brings concerts from New York to the Sacramento Community Theater. He was a graduate of Sac High and the University of Pacific, where he majored in music, served as president of the music fraternity Phi Mu Alpha, and conducted the then famous 77-piece marching band of what was then College of the Pacific. He met his wife Barbara at college, who survives him along with their 2 sons and 8 grandchildren and 4 great-grandchildren. He was my music teacher in junior high and high school, and we actually we had a band called 6 Hits and a Miss, me being the miss. And then in high school, he also was active in the North Area Potluck Symphony, which he dragged me into also, so I played in that with him. And I recently saw him at a community event I had, and I hadn't seen him since high school, and he just, the famous line, he walked up and said, "Hi, remember me?" It took me a minute, and then of course I recognized Mr. K, and he leaves a great legacy of music behind. We'll miss him. And my last adjournment today is in memory of Kay Backer. Late last year, Sacramento County lost a true land use professional, emphasis on professional, with the passing of Kay Backer. She was a native of Missouri, but identified Sacramento as her home for the last 55 years. She put down professional roots in this county, witnessing its growth and development as she worked for 20 years at the contract engineering firm Wismer & Becker. Later, she spent 9 years as vice president of Tykert Land Company and left the confines of corporate environment with an entrepreneurial spirit, formed her own company in 1993, KBI International. Many of us dealt with Kay over the years, and she was always articulate and professional, and at all times gracious. She really will be missed. And this Sunday, January 15th, a celebration of her life will be held at the Delta King. So I ask that this board adjourn in her memory, that of Sam Camillos and Ray Stone Jr. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to suggest we also adjourn in memory of a great longtime Sacramentan, Frank Cyril, who passed away this past Saturday, the 7th. Many of you probably knew Frank. He was perhaps the most active American River Parkway activist that this community has ever seen. He was a longtime resident of River Park, avid runner, outdoorsman, fly fisherman, cyclist, and kayaker. He devoted his life to preserving Sacramento's American River Parkway. He was born in 1922 to Italian immigrants. He moved to California at age 15, and following his service in the Merchant Marine during World War II, he moved to Sacramento in 1949. Many of you will recall our state capitol being enveloped in scaffolding for a number of years. Well, Frank was a retired engineer. He retired engineer and construction estimator from 1950 until 1987, and he helped actually oversee the $68 million restoration of the state capitol. Perhaps he's best known as a very active member of the Save the American River Association, where he served on the board from 1968 onward, and served as president from 1978 through 1994, and later became president emeritus. Some of his accomplishments include being an active participant and contributor to the adoption in 1976, 1984, and 2006 of the American River Parkway plans. He was very active in his efforts and his community's efforts to address Calixbo parking lot expansion near Bushy Lake, and also to ensure public access near the Fair Oaks Bluffs overlooking the American River. He was also very instrumental in helping organize Epi's great race for Sue Frost. One of the things that you're going to be initiated on is that every year we have a bit of a show here in Chambers as it relates to Epi's great race, and Frank was right front and center of that event during his life. In 2016, Frank was inducted into the Recreation Parks and Leisure Hall of Honor for the California Park and Recreation Society District 2. Recently, Frank's daughter, Lisa, shared with the Sacramento Bee that Frank's goal in life was always to preserve the parkway for future generations and maintain it as the jewel that it is. I will tell you that on a personal note, I knew Frank during my father's tenure on the city council, and as their friendship blossomed, and my dad took quite a bit of advice from Frank on matters relating to the parkway, especially development that was beginning to encroach on the parkway. I know that Joe Cerna always went to Frank as kind of the oracle on all things parkway. In 2009, when I first ran for the board, I got a call one afternoon from Frank to come have coffee at his place in River Park. We had a great conversation. We talked about how important the parkway is to all 5 districts on the Board of Supervisors. And then, of course, we talked about our common love for fly fishing. Frank leaves behind his wife of 56 years, Doris, son Curtis, daughter Lisa, and 3 grandchildren, Rose, Wolfgang, and Levon. So, Mr. Chair, I'd like to respectfully ask that we adjourn in the memory of Frank Searle.
Okay. Thank you, Phil. Well, as we mourn the loss of some community members and certainly celebrate their lives, I too have a couple of adjournments to add to today's list. And in addition to those that have been mentioned, first I would like to have us consider adjourning in memory of Russell Middaugh. Russell Benjamin Middaugh, age 95, passed away peacefully on December 28, 2016 here in Sacramento. He was born in Portsmouth, Ohio, October 31st, 1921, was the son of Marguerite Stricklet and Russell Floyd Middaugh. He lived in Ohio until 1964 when he moved to California and eventually settled in the Sacramento area. He served honorably in the United States Navy during World War II and later in the Air National Guard and the Naval Reserve. He was married to Frances Chamberlain in August of 1945, and he and Frances had 3 daughters, Kathy, Karen, and Julie, and folks here in the county also would know Julie as Julie Valverde. He worked as a wood pattern maker until his retirement in 1977. He later, in his retirement, worked for the Mission Oaks Park and Recreation District. He enjoyed playing and watching basketball and baseball, was a season ticket holder to the Sacramento Kings and the Monarchs as well. He was preceded in death by his wife, Frances, survived by his daughters, Kathy Girton and Julie Valverde of Sacramento, and Karen Tyree of Columbus, Ohio. Also survived by 4 grandchildren, 6 great-grandchildren. Memorial service will be planned at a later date, and the family has asked that in lieu of flowers that any contributions be made to the Alzheimer's Association, which can be found obviously on the World Wide Web. I'll just note too that this gentleman, when Julie was employed, certainly as our finance director here at the county, and worked many years for Sacramento County. He often would accompany Julie to events, and it was interesting with Phil Rios here earlier on behalf of veterans when we were raising money for the Veterans Hall that this county funds, and that was in some question of whether it would receive county funding. It's a pretty minor amount of money, but nonetheless, $15,000 or $20,000 during the down times was always in play, and that I still recall that our interim county executive time, Steve Zaley, and I think Nav was right there at his shoulder, had a fundraiser, and I still remember Julie's dad coming to them, being a veteran, someone who was interested, obviously, in supporting things that were important to his peers, but also to this community, and just a very interesting gentleman, and certainly at age 95, someone who lived a long life, but made contributions during his 50-some years here in our community, and certainly we send our condolences to Julie and to her sisters and to their family. The second adjournment that again, kind of harkens back to what Susan said a moment ago, folks that have touched our lives, certainly as school teachers and whether band teachers or coaches or whatever. And over the past couple of weeks, the community of Galt, but certainly the Sacramento region, lost someone who was well recognized in the annals of high school football for his coaching abilities. He coached for some 40 years at my alma mater, Galt High School, and that's Irv Hatzenbuehler. Irv, at age 83, passed away peacefully in sleep several days ago. But coming to Galt High School in the mid-1960s and coaching up and through the early 2000s, he had a very successful on-field record. And a lot of times those are measured by wins and losses. But I think probably his greatest success, and as a testament to this, there was a memorial held at Irv Hatzenbuehler Field in Warrior Stadium in Galt 2 Fridays ago. It was a very, very cold night, but there were hundreds of folks that showed up to, pay their respects to his family. His son Mark, who was an outstanding high school football player, went on to star in college as well. But to, I think, recognize the impact that he had on that community and the lives of people in that community. And not unlike communities up and down the state of California, and certainly in this region and throughout the United States, Friday night football is a big deal. And for season after season, Irv and the Warrior football teams, I think, inspired and motivated folks not only to come out and support their team, but to cheer on several generations of young people, particularly young men, on the football field. But he had quite an impact on the football field, but also in the classroom as a teacher and as a mentor and a coach in many different ways. And he coached at the same time my father coached at Galt High School. My father was obviously coaching in the basketball program, but I know been a long-time family friend, someone who I admired, and had a deep faith, was committed to his community, and again, was a good role model. He could be a fierce competitor, pretty ferocious out there in the field, and I know it was joked about that he could get very close up in the face, not only of his players, but of the officials who might be given that particular assignment on any given Friday night. But all things said, he cared about the young people that he taught and coached, and had a great impact on their lives. And again, I certainly considered him a friend, not only to the family as a youngster, but in more recently, obviously, just a good friend and someone who cared about his community. So 40 years of coaching and 40 years of doing anything is a long time, but high school gridiron, and again, he impacted many, many people. And so we want to recognize he leaves behind his wife, Betty, and son Mark, and grandchildren, and again, was a tremendous influence in that community, but certainly in high school football throughout the years. And so we send our condolences to his family. So unless there's any other adjournments, then we today will adjourn in memory of 6 individuals: Ray Stone Jr., Sam Camillus, Kay Backer, Frank Searle, Russell Middaugh, and Irv Hatzenbuehler. And anything else to come before this body? If not, then we will stand in adjournment. Welcome, and we'll be back in a couple of weeks.
Thank you.